You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, you know, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot. From Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor's report to the Justice Department about the Russian interference in the election and Donald Trump's role in it. This is from the introduction to Volume 1, page 1. The Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election in sweeping and systematic fashion. Evidence of Russian government operations began to surface in mid-2016. In June, the Democratic National Committee and its cyber response team publicly announced that Russian hackers had compromised its computer network. Releases of hacked materials, hacks that public reporting soon attributed to the Russian government, began that same month. Additional releases followed in July through the organization WikiLeaks, with further releases in October and November. In late July 2016, soon after WikiLeaks' first release of stolen documents, a foreign government contacted the FBI about a May 2016 encounter with Trump campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos had suggested to a representative of that foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications that from the Russian government, that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. That information prompted the FBI on July 31st, 2016, to open an investigation into whether individuals associated with the Trump campaign were coordinating with the Russian government in its interference activities. That fall, two federal agencies jointly announced that the Russian government, quote, directed recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including U.S. political organizations, and these thefts and disclosures are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process, end quote. After the election in late December 2016, the United States imposed sanctions on Russia for having interfered in the election. By early 2017, several congressional committees were examining Russia's interference in the election. Within the executive branch, these investigatory efforts ultimately led to the May 2017 appointment of Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III. The order appointing the special counsel authorized him to investigate, quote, the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, including any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. As set forth in detail in this report, the special counsel's investigation established that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election principally through two operations. First, a Russian entity carried out a social media campaign that favored presidential candidate Donald J. Trump and disparaged presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Second, a Russian intelligence service conducted counter-intrusion operations against entities, employees, and volunteers working on the Clinton campaign and then released stolen documents. The investigation also identified numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. Although the investigation established that the Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, and that the campaign expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Below, we describe the evidentiary considerations underpinning statements about the results of our investigation and the special counsel's charging decisions, and we then provide an overview of the 2 volumes of our report. The report describes actions and events that the special counsel's office found to be supported by the evidence collected in our investigation. In some instances, the report points out the absence of evidence or conflicts in the evidence about a particular fact or event. In other instances, when substantial, credible evidence enabled the office to reach the conclusion with confidence. The where that happened. The report states that the investigation established that certain actions or events occurred. A statement that the investigation did not establish particular facts does not mean there was no evidence of those facts. In evaluating whether evidence about collective action of multiple individuals constituted a crime, we applied the framework of conspiracy law, not the concept of collusion. In so doing, the office recognized that the word collude was used in communications with the acting attorney general, confirming certain aspects of the investigation's scope, and that the term has been frequently invoked in public reporting about the investigation. But collusion is not a specific offense or theory of liability found in the United States Code, nor is it a term of art in federal criminal law. For those reasons, the office's focus on analyzing questions of joint criminal liability was on conspiracy as defined in federal law. In connection with that analysis, we addressed the factual question whether members of the Trump campaign, quote, coordinated, a term that appears in the appointment order, with Russian election interference activities. We understood coordination does not have a settled definition in federal law, federal criminal law. We understood coordination to require an agreement, tacit or express, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government on election interference. That requires more than the two parties taking actions that were informed by or responsive to the other's actions or interests. We applied the term coordination in that sense when stating in the report that the investigation did not establish that the Trump campaign coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. The report on our investigation consists of 2 volumes. Volume 1 describes the factual results of the special counsel's investigation of Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election and its interactions with the Trump campaign. Section 1 describes the scope of the investigation. Sections 2 and 3 describe the principal ways Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Wednesday, so it's time for Middays with Mark. The Mueller hearings are on hold. The Barr hearings about the Mueller report are on hold and will be picked back up in about an hour from now. So we will be carrying a lot of that with, during our show live in the second and third hour of our programs. But right now, Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. His website is pocan.house.gov, P-O-C-A-N. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. He's with us for the hour. It's our Middays with Mark segment. You can call, and he's available to answer your questions or listen to your opinions. 202-808-9925 is the telephone number. Congressman, welcome back.
Oh, thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
Great to have you with us. So I'm curious your take or your thoughts on the state of the Mueller investigation and William Safire back in '92 referred to him as, in the New York Times, as cover-up General Barr because he had covered up Iran-Contra and Iraq-gate back in '92. What are your thoughts on all this?
I think he's kept the nickname, and now we're going to have to use it again. I think we all were surprised to find out that a letter had been written to him from Robert Mueller about how he characterized the report in that first summary. And then it appears he may have lied to Congress when he said he didn't know what Mr. Mueller thought about it. I think, the hearing today will be very interesting to see the responses and how he actually answers some of the questions. We already know he's been answering some of that already. But, you pointed this out a long time ago, Tom, about his history. I think you were one of the first people I had heard talk about all that he did back in the Nixon administration, and now we're seeing it all happen again. So, for Donald Trump to, again, claim he's been exonerated by that report, which we all know, anyone who's read it knows that's not true. Now if he starts to make it harder for people to come to Congress and testify to get clarity about what's in the report, he is pushing us to something like impeachment proceedings. He's pushing us to be forced to get the information, and he's showing the American people that he lied to them about being exonerated because innocent people don't act like that. And I think, Donald Trump will dig his own problems by doing this.
Yeah. It was, by the way, it was during the senior Bush administration.
I'm sorry, Bush. Did I say Nixon? I'm sorry, Bush.
I figured that's what you meant, but
yeah.
I'm curious your thought. I mean, you look at the Nixon impeachment. Article 1 was obstruction of justice. Article 2 was abuse of power. Article 3 was contempt of Congress. Refusing to let people testify. Article 4 was the Cambodia bombing, which was arguably a war crime. Not even arguably, it was a war crime. And Article 5 was failure to pay taxes, of all things. I'm wondering your thoughts and what you think is the sense of your colleagues with regard to the possibility of impeachment in the U.S. House of Representatives, or whether, one of the issues and one of the debates and the position I've been taking on this is that in the Clinton impeachment, as soon as the Starr report came in in all its pornographic glory, the Republicans said, okay, cool, we got the report, let's go. And they just voted for impeachment and threw it to the Senate. And the Senate, of course, didn't vote to impeach. In the case of Nixon, you had, an analysis that was happening, but you also had months, literally, of hearings in the Senate that were chaired by Sam Ervin that laid bare for the American people in a way that was absolutely irrefutable that this guy's a crook. And we saw where, when the hearings started 2 months, at the beginning of the process, I forget the month, but it was a 2-month period, 9-week period. At the beginning of that process, only 19% of Americans thought Nixon should be impeached. Right. By the beginning of the week in which he resigned, which was before there was a formal declaration that we're going to impeach this guy, there was 57% in public opinion. And that was the point at which Barry Goldwater went over to the White House and said, buddy, you got to go. And and so I'm wondering, I've been advocating there should be hearings to bring this stuff out. And if you call them impeachment hearings, you get some extra Article 3 powers for the Article 1 branch for Congress, because and you eliminate the president's ability to pardon, because that pardon has one single exception, and that's except during times of impeachment. So it would kind of ring fence Trump. But anyhow, those are my thoughts on it. I'm curious yours.
Yeah, and I just had a lot of town halls in the last couple of weeks when I was back home in 6 different counties in my district, and this conversation came up a lot. I think this is more a parallel of the Nixon times than the Clinton times, because it's obvious we have to have Bob Mueller come before Congress, right? It's obvious from reading the report, Don McGahn. There's a conflict in what the president's saying right now and what's in the report, so Don McGahn is the only person who can provide that clarity. And some other witnesses that we're going to have to bring in. If the president finds a way to encourage people not to, and he obstructs us getting witnesses to come, and he claims he's innocent, and he even claims he hasn't had a chance to refute the charges that are in the report, we're giving him a chance. And if he doesn't do any of that, I think, in places like Wisconsin and most of the country that don't live and breathe Washington politics, we live by a smell test. And it looks like you're lying by any smell test. If you claim you're innocent, but you won't let anyone appear before Congress to provide clarity, you look guilty. And if he does that, he may push us into impeachment proceedings in order to get more information. But I do think that crucial middle period is the period we're in right now, and I think that's the wisest way to proceed.
Yeah, okay. We've got some calls on the line. Let's pick up, let's go for it. Steve in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yes, Mr. Pocan. I was wondering, is there ever going to be a time where Mitch McConnell will be held responsible for trying to form a mutiny against Obama?
Boy, I'll tell you, Mitch McConnell, not that we should have expected much more, but he has been pathetically awful this session, especially given that he's up in 2020. Both he and Lindsey Graham, Lindsey Graham at least at one point stood by his friend John McCain. Now, he's sitting at the right hand of the president, waiting to, get his belly rubbed. That behavior is what's really causing many of the problems. So we're going to knock a whole bunch of bills over to the Senate, and we're going to put a lot of pressure on Mitch McConnell. But whether it responds to past things he's done or responds to the complete obstruction that he's going to do to everything we try to send over, it's going to be difficult unless the voters of his state decide to have a way to respond. So, the best way people can across the country, if they don't like Mitch McConnell, get rid of Republican senators. And by doing that, you have a Democratic Senate, we have a Democratic president, hopefully in 2020, and a Democratic House. We can get a whole lot done that I think is really crucial.
Pat in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Is that me?
That's you, Pat.
Seattle?
You're on the air.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I have a kind of a specific question. If the House Judiciary Committee started the articles of impeachment, would that give the committee more power to get people to testify and to get documents handed over instead of just subpoenaing people and documents? Could you be specific about the ways in which the articles of impeachment expand that power of the House Judiciary Committee?
Sure, Pat. It would ease the process, but I would argue, again, I think like we just mentioned with in the era with Nixon, I think credibly trying to bring witnesses out now, and if Donald Trump blocks them or tries to block them from coming, it does not look like an innocent man. And we clearly know, anyone who's read the report knows he's not an innocent man. I think that's really needed to gain the public opinion we need to have to when we get to the point of getting some of this additional information and we're actually trying to pull a trigger to get a stronger action to happen, that public opinion during this period is going to be crucial. So I don't know if immediately going into impeachment serves the same purpose as trying to get the witnesses and seeing how Donald Trump handles this. Because, again, an innocent person shouldn't be trying to stop people from testifying to Congress.
We live in amazing times, don't we, Congressman?
Unbelievable.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, it's Middays with Mark here. Congressman Mark Pocan on the line with us taking your calls. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. His website is pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep, as in Representative, R-E-P, Mark Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And you can ask him, whatever's on your mind here at 202-808-9925. And welcome back. Tim in Beaverton, Oregon, watching us on Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes. Are you talking to me?
I am, Tim. You're on the air.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I didn't hear you say my name. Yeah, a simple question, and I don't think it's received enough attention in the media, although Fox News carried it completely, was what is your reaction to Trump's rally in Green Bay? I have never seen anything more obscene than that. I mean, it's scary stuff. Is that what the Wisconsin, your voter base is still turning to that man? Wisconsin put him in by 22,000 votes in the general election. It's scary stuff. What he was saying.
Yeah. So I'll tell you. Let me give you some assurances, Tim, about my home state. I think he's got the biggest drop off in Wisconsin of any state he won, and a lot of the reason I believe he won Wisconsin was because of how he talked about trade, about bringing jobs back to America. Hillary Clinton, I think the strongest thing she said about the Trans-Pacific Partnership was, I don't support the TPP as currently written, was hardly very aspirational, and a lot of Democrats stayed home, and he won our state narrowly by 23,000 votes. But because of his really inept policy around trade, he doesn't really know what he means. We're now in tariff wars that are hurting our dairy farmers and hurting our soybean farmers and others in the state. So he actually is very unpopular, and I think we always, like every state, could fill a stadium with his supporters, but by and large, he's got the biggest drop-off in Wisconsin of any state. So I think we are definitely in a good place for Democrats in 2020 in what would be a normally bluish-purple state.
Okay, and Lawrence in North Hollywood, California, listening on KPFK. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello.
Hey, you're on the air, Lawrence.
Hi, how's it going? I had a question regarding Donald Trump's tax returns. This has obviously been an ongoing saga for a really long time. And I'm just wondering, it's kind of fallen out of the media. Obviously, there's bigger stories, but I'm just wondering, how is he getting away with this for so long? When are we going to see his tax returns?
Yeah, well, first of all, Lawrence, the push first started in the last few months to get his tax returns because we weren't in charge of the last Congress. So it's not like it's been that long amount of time. And second, not only did we put it in H.R. 1, a bill we passed out of the House, but we've actually are following the law, requesting the returns as per the current law, and he is trying to obstruct that. So we've got a date coming up on May, I want to say it's 7th or 8th, I think, that he has to respond again. But we do have other levers to try to get those returns, and I just talked to Richie Neal, the person who's the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, earlier this week about this, and they're going to continue to pursue it in every possible way. So, it's really only been a couple months that they've been requested because the last 2 years, Paul Ryan never stood up to the president, never did the proper role of Congress and oversight. So we're going to keep working at it. There's nothing that's diminished from that.
Do you think Congressman Neal has the strongest shot at this because of the law that explicitly says that the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee can request any citizen in the United States' tax returns?
Yes, and he's making the request directly to the head of the IRS because that's what the law says, and yet the Secretary of the Treasury seems to be the one responding to him. So there's a few other interesting paths I think we're going to have on this, but he is very dogged in the pursuit.
Yeah, but he's being blocked by the foreclosure king, Steve Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury. Amazing. Congressman Mark Pocan with us taking your calls. Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for the Congressman in just a moment, coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, you know, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Patreon. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Middays with Mark, Congressman Mark Pocan, taking your calls. David in St. Paul, listening on KTNF. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. David? No, David. David's on line 7, Joyce, if you want to check that out. Lewis in Chicago, listening on WCPT. It says you disagree. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Tom. Good morning, Congressman Pocan. As you stated, Congressman Pocan, part of your job is oversight, and I just want to know how you feel about how Hillary destroyed emails that were under subpoena, destroyed phones with hammers, leaked a server, and didn't give you the opportunity for that oversight. I mean, you were robbed of the opportunity. You are the person that we have out there to look at this information. You should have been able to see it and give your opinion on it, and you were robbed of that. And
got it, Lewis. You're starting to be redundant, Congressman.
Yeah, all I can really say is I do not believe that either Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster have Hillary's emails. I mean, this is just the people who have obsession around Hillary, including apparently Lindsey Graham during questioning today of the Attorney General. We had an investigation for 2 years around Hillary's emails, and there were no indictments. We had 2 years in the Mueller investigation, and 30-some people were indicted. I think we get the difference.
Nathan in Hood River, Oregon. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, I got great news. Are you familiar with Mark Crispin Miller's book, Fooled Again?
I am not.
This is okay. So I think Tom's pretty familiar with it.
Yeah, I know Mark.
And okay, so
it's basically a book about voting machines. What's your point, Nathan? Or what's your question?
The point is, if Democrats start making vote counting machines and start controlling them, I think what you characterize as wacky exit polls would start to align more with the rule of the actual voting that is going on, or the fact that these exit polls are so different from the results is just an indication that.
So Nathan, what's your question or
my
point?
question is, when are we going to start taking this vote counting system that we have that is run by Republicans? All the machines are owned by Republicans, and all the results and all the mistakes seem to favor Republicans. When are Democrats going to start making their own vote counting machines and start counting their own votes, so we don't have this continuous drift to the right? Which is why,
to paraphrase Joe Stalin, it doesn't matter who votes; it matters who counts the votes. Congressman.
Right. Well, I can tell you this, Nathan. In H.R. 1, we have a number of measures trying to address our voting system to make sure that we have more integrity. One, it should be part of our national critical infrastructure to make sure you've got protections not just around the commissions that run the elections, but the companies that make the voting machines, because they can be hacked, and the Russians, we know, tried to hack into those companies as part of their interference that Jared Kushner referred to as a few Facebook ads. Secondly, my provision to make sure that we had a paper ballot, a paper trail on every single electronic voting machine so you can have a hand count verifiable recount was also in H.R. 1. So there's a number of measures we have looking at that. I do agree with you, though. I mean, I have some concerns when, you know, for a while the Republicans last session were going to take away the commission that approved patches. So patches would go directly from the company to a local municipality doing it without anyone looking at it. And that would have been a terrible idea, and they did back off of that. But we need to make sure that people know that the elections are fair and honest. Otherwise, you're not going to have the participation. So I hear what you're saying, Nathan, and I just have to add, Hood River is one of, I think, the most beautiful places in our country. I used to love going out there when I'd visit my family in Portland, and appreciate you calling from Hood River.
It is a great town. Nick in Madison, Wisconsin, another great town. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
All right. Well, thank you for giving my town a compliment. Anyway, quick question. You guys are pretty smart dudes. So what happens when your boy Trumpy pleads the fifth? What does that mean for us little people? What does that mean? Could you explain it?
And hasn't he effectively already done that, Congressman? I mean, by refusing to talk to Mueller?
Well, exactly. And, you know, when you look at that part where he gave the written answers, I mean, I think he said, I don't know, or I don't remember 30 times. He outright ignored questions. I mean, that's my only real complaint of the report is I wish they would have compelled him to somehow come, and I would have been okay if that would have delayed the report. I think it was important enough. All the more reason why he claims he's innocent. He should let people come before us. In fact, I think if he wants to come, I would welcome him to come. Of course, we know that won't happen. So, Nick, I think we've got plenty of tools by bringing other folks in. And if he tries to stop them from coming, again, as you know from Wisconsin, that doesn't pass a smell test. It's not going to work for him. So I do think we've got lots of recourse, and we have recourse for people who won't come that we can do, from contempt of Congress to find other things. So legal actions, we're going to work this very, very aggressively and very hard.
Would political theater, like putting a cardboard cutout of Donald Trump in an empty chair and interrogating it, be beneath the dignity of Congress? It would, wouldn't it?
You know, probably some of the folks who've been around for a while don't enjoy theater like you and I do, Tom. But,
yeah.
I'm always open to ideas like that.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your call. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. You know, one of the top progressive members of the entire United States Congress, right here taking your calls, your questions in our national town hall meeting, Middays with Mark. We'll be back with more of your questions for Congressman Pocan in just a moment.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Congressman Pocan's website is pocan.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. We'll be back right after this break. We are reading from the Mueller report. This is from page 5. It's the subset of Russian contacts with the campaign. Spring 2016. Campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos made early contact with Joseph Mifsud, a London-based professor who had connections to Russia and traveled to Moscow in April 2016. Immediately upon his return to London from that trip, Mifsud told Papadopoulos that the Russian government had dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. 1 week later, in the first week of May 2016, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to candidate Clinton. Throughout that period of time, and for several months thereafter, Papadopoulos worked with Mifsud and 2 Russian nationals to arrange a meeting between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. No meeting took place. September 2016, Russian outreach to the Trump campaign continued into the summer of 2016. Trump was becoming the presumptive Republican nominee for president. On June 9th, 2016, for example, a Russian lawyer met with senior Trump campaign officials Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and campaign chairman Paul Manafort to deliver what the email proposed the meeting had described as, quote, official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary, end quote. The materials were offered to Trump Jr. as, quote, part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, end quote. The written communications setting up the meeting showed that the campaign anticipated receiving information from Russia that could assist candidate Trump's electoral prospects, but the Russian lawyer's presentation did not provide such information. Days after the June 9 meeting and on June 14, 2016, a cybersecurity firm and the DNC announced that Russian government hackers had infiltrated the DNC and obtained access to opposition research on candidate Trump, among other documents. In July 2016, campaign and foreign policy advisor Carter Page traveled in his personal capacity to Moscow and gave the keynote address at the New Economic School. Page had lived and worked in Russia between 2003 and 2007. After returning to the United States, Page became acquainted with at least 2 Russian intelligence officers, one of whom was later charged in 2015 with conspiracy to act as an unregistered agent of Russia. Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow and his advocacy for pro-Russian foreign policy drew media attention. The campaign then distanced itself from Page and by late September 2016 removed him from the campaign. July 2016 was also the month WikiLeaks first released emails stolen by the GRU from the DNC. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks posted thousands of internal DNC documents revealing information about the Clinton campaign. Within days, there was public reporting that U.S. intelligence agencies had high confidence that the Russian government was behind the theft of emails and documents from the DNC. And within a week of the release, a foreign government informed the FBI about its May 2016 interaction with Papadopoulos and his statement that the Russian government could assist the Trump campaign. On July 31st, 2016, based on the foreign government reporting, the FBI opened an investigation into potential coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Separately, on August 2nd, 2016, Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort met in New York City with his longtime business associate Konstantin Kilimnik, who the FBI assesses to have ties to Russian intelligence. Kilimnik requested the meeting to deliver in person a peace plan for Ukraine that Manafort acknowledged to the special counsel's office was a, quote, backdoor, end quote, way for Russia to control part of eastern Ukraine. Both men believe the plan would require candidate Trump's assent to succeed were he to be elected president. They also discussed the status of the Trump campaign and Manafort's strategy for winning Democratic votes in Midwestern states. Months before that meeting, Manafort had caused internal polling data to be shared with Kilimnik, and the sharing continued for some period of time after their August meeting. Fall 2016. On October 7th, 2016, the media released video of candidate Trump speaking in graphic terms about women years earlier, which was considered damaging to his candidacy. Less than an hour later, WikiLeaks made its second release. Thousands of John Podesta's emails that had been stolen by the GRU in late March of 2016. The FBI and other U.S. government institutions were at the time continuing their investigation of suspected Russian government efforts to interfere in the presidential election. That same day, October 7th, the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence issued a joint public statement that, quote, the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations, end quote. Those thefts and the disclosures of the hacked materials through online platforms such as WikiLeaks, the statement continued, quote, are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process, end quote. Post-2016 election. Immediately after the November 8 election, Russian government officials and prominent Russian businessmen began to make inroads into the new administration. The most senior levels of the Russian government encouraged these efforts. The Russian embassy made contact hours after the election to congratulate the president-elect and arrange a call with President Putin. It's the Mueller report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. Congressman Mark Pocan, co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, taking your calls for the hour. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. His website, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. And Kimber in Los Angeles, listening on KPFK. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. First of all, thank you, Tom, for all you do. Thank you, Congressman Pocan, for all you do. I wanted to speak about the policy that Nancy Pelosi and Schumer introduced yesterday. And initially, my first reaction was very close to Tom's, which is, why are they doing this? This is terrible. It's bad timing, et cetera, et cetera. But later on, I thought, and I'd like to get your answer, and I'll take that off air. If not, this was actually a brilliant chess move, because first of all, it took a very important big issue that everyone wants, and the Democrats were the initiators of the policy. And whether they get the taxes reversed or whatever, they initiated, rather than having Trump as a distraction tactic to present his version to the Democratic House. They don't want to work with him. They shouldn't, because he's a liar and he's a con man. But then he would be able to, for the next year and a half, use that to say, look, I'm trying to do this great thing for the country that everyone wants and needs, 1 million jobs. The Democrats are stopping it. They are anti-American. They are politicizing it. They don't want the million jobs. I think that what they did, Schumer and Pelosi did, actually was brilliant, because they took that completely away from Trump. And then for the next year and a half, we have 20 wonderful candidates who has all of the hearings, not for impeachment, but all of these hearings with all of your committees to do the slow burn over the next 6 months to the beginning of our election cycle, to be laying out for the American people the truth of the Mueller report. Our candidates are going to be reiterating that throughout the rest of this year. And I think there's a lot of problems that will be coming for Trump with all of the taxes and all of these issues.
Kimber, let's let the congressman answer your question, okay?
Sure. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
No problem, Kimber. I agree with your observation. I mean, I think by putting out, we ran on investing in infrastructure. So it's an issue that we had all of our candidates run on. That's how we took back the House majority, one of our 3 biggest issues, and lifting people's wages by investing in our infrastructure. And I think, the ball now is in the president's court on how to fund it. We have had some conversations about how we would do it, but the president has never been serious about whether it be that 80-20 split, which would have private sector firms build infrastructure, which isn't realistic, or any real revenue. So I think by having us put that out there, it's kind of like during the campaign. I think what worked well for him in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania was his talk about bringing jobs back to America. And then, of course, he didn't deliver on it because he doesn't actually know what he means. In this case now, we hopefully are the ones who are leading with what infrastructure should be. And if he can't deliver again because his Republicans won't be there with any funding, then it's his failure as the leader of the Republican Party, essentially. So I do think we're in a good place because of how the conversations occurred yesterday.
Sharon in Sandstone, Minnesota. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Sharon?
Hi.
Hey.
I was thinking, what do you think of this idea? I think on every big holiday coming up, we need to have some sort of a national demonstration, like Memorial Day weekend, the weekend that we are respecting the people that have died for this country. Wherever you are, stop in at the graveyard, the county seat, with your signs and your family, and let everyone know that wherever we are, we're here, and get the word out.
Yeah, I hear Sharon. I think, one of the things I've been very impressed with in the last couple of years is a lot of our progressive groups that we work with, from Indivisible to Move On to DFA, PCCC, Public Citizen. Go down the list. I shouldn't start a list because there's a lot of groups that could be in there, are working together and been doing collaborative days of action, or ready for, like if Mueller was fired, there were going to be hundreds and hundreds of rallies across the country. People signed up ready to be there. So I think the fact that within the movement we do agree with what you're saying. The more that we're able to show that joint visibility, the better off it is. And the fact that it's organized through groups and, fortunately through social media, you can get people to act quickly, that's in place. So I think you're on the right idea, Sharon, and that's what the progressive groups also are working towards.
Ingrid, in watching us on Free Speech TV in Myerstown, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Ingrid?
Hello.
You're on the air.
Everybody's doing a great job. Love the program.
Thank you.
Congressman, the Medicare for All, I know you're working on that, and I know there were hearings yesterday. What I'm wondering about is, especially if they want to try to cover everything, Bernie talks about dental, vision, and all that, and of course Medicare doesn't pay the whole cost. Are we looking at what other countries do? We have a roadmap there. If we're willing to get away from this idea we know best about everything, why can't we look at what all the other countries are doing in depth and look at what they allow for the costs and go from that?
Yeah, Ingrid, I think that's what happened in putting together the new Medicare for All bill, because Bernie Sanders last session put one that was different than the House version that had been out there for a decade or longer, and we modernized ours to be a little closer to Bernie's, but also to even fine-tune a little more. But it is important that people have dental and vision care and things like that. So this is a much better, more comprehensive bill by looking at what all the other countries are doing. It's just for us, we currently have a model under Medicare that works very well for people in this country. It's one of the most popular federal programs. So if we can expand upon that through the Medicare for All bill, and I think the hearing did a really great job of showing that yesterday, we're going to be the best off. We will have very similar policies as other countries. It's just working within a system that people in the United States already are used to having health care delivered through. So I think the real thing that is incumbent on us is to keep educating lawmakers and having constituents reach out to their lawmakers about their support for this proposal, because I think then we can assure it's not a question if it becomes a reality. It's just a question of when it becomes a reality. But we do have that education process to do, which is what we're doing right now.
Ahmad in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah. Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, just fine.
All right. Thank you, guys. Hi, Tom. Hi, Congressman Mac. You guys are doing an awesome job. I just wanted to get that out of the way.
Thank you.
But my question is, when are the Democrats going to have some backbone to start having the loudest voice out there in the media and everywhere to get this foreign agent out of the White House? We're living in a time where basically a lot of us progressive, we're sitting here screaming, we're angry, we're looking at president commit crimes after crimes. And it seems like the Democrats are always basically trying to be the diplomat. They're trying to basically be the nice ones. Nice ain't going to work for this guy. So that's my question. And before I go, thank you guys for working on the Medicare bill. Thanks. I'm going to get my question up here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ahmed. So I think I'd answer it in this way. I mean, there is plenty of action going around, plenty of people who are concerned and speak out against the president, follow almost any of our social media, and you'll see that. Whether or not the mainstream media picks all that up, I'm not sure. I think what you are referring to, though, is our approach right now post-Mueller report. And I would argue, don't forget, things like impeachment require bipartisan support. And it is the building of the public support, as Tom mentioned at the beginning of the program, like happened when Richard Nixon was impeached, when the support was under 20% initially and got to a majority by Congress doing the proper hearings and bringing witnesses forth. You know, I asked this question in my town halls, Tom, and I thought this was interesting. I asked how many people read the Mueller report. I believe I had one person who read the entire Mueller report out of 6 town halls.
Yeah, it's a
and
tome.
A couple people read parts of it. That's the reality, right? We don't expect people to read a 480-page document, but by bringing some of those witnesses in front of committees, in front of cameras, and they say some of the things that are in there, that's going to bring the American public to understand just how corrupt this president is, just how much he committed obstruction repeatedly in office. And that's what's going to help us with the case. So it's not that I think things aren't happening, Ahmed. I think it's just we're doing it in a way that builds the proper case we need to make for the American people.
It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. His website, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan. And we'll be back with more of your calls for him on Middays with Mark in just a moment. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's 44 minutes past the hour. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back. And by the way, Bernie Sanders will be with us a little later on in the program. And welcome back. Stephanie in Altadena, California, listening on KPFK. Stephanie, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan and me.
Hello?
Hey, Stephanie. You're on the air, although I think you've got us on a speakerphone or something. You need to just turn that off. This is not working. Let's try. Stephanie's on line 5. Joyce, if you want to check that out. Thomas in Rancho Palos. Whoa, is that us? Oh, that's Congressman Pocan?
Huh. My line has gone. I can hear you, I think.
Yeah.
Are you there?
Okay, yeah.
I had a buzz the whole time. I couldn't hear anything.
I'm hearing myself. This is downright strange.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. Can you call us right back, Congressman Pocan?
Yeah, sure. It just started with the last call, if that helps you. If you're identifying it.
It's something's going on, but call us right back, please. So we will be back with Congressman Pocan in just a moment because something went weird with our phones, and I have no idea what it is, and hopefully we'll find out as soon as he calls back. I hope the wrong button didn't get pushed someplace. But anyhow, just to recap the stuff I was talking about the history's rhyme Nixon's articles of impeachment. This is from emptywheel.net, Marcy Wheeler's website, and she just put this up. She's talking about how history, as they say, doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. By now, many of us have heard or read discussions. It looks like Congressman Pocan. Oh, there, I hear the phone ringing now. Okay. Anyhow, that Article 1 was obstruction of justice against Richard Nixon. Article 2, abuse of power. Article 3, contempt of Congress. Article 4, the Cambodia bombing. Article 5, failure to pay taxes. Okay, let's see if this is working now. Congressman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. And the weird echo is gone, too. So.
Good.
And we still have 1 minute and 20 seconds to the break. So, Stephanie in Altadena, California, listening on KPFK, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
I'll go quickly.
Thank
you. My concern is why no one mentions or calls Barr on the carpet as to his low-handed things he's done with the Nixon administration and also with the Bush administration, or things like Ivanka Trump getting a patent on a voting machine. No one brings those things up. So that's it. I'm done.
Yeah, okay. That's a good one, Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. I mean, I'm not sure what the Senate's doing today because I have not seen the hearing, so I can't say that anyone has not brought things up, although I think right now the strongest arguments are against his most recent lies, his most recent action as a defense attorney for the president rather than the attorney general for the people of the United States. In fact, one of the things he said when they asked about executive what's the proper term where they can opt themselves out of doing
privilege.
Something. Executive privilege, thank you. He said the word, well, we haven't done that yet. It's not we. He's the Attorney General. That's separate than the executive office, and yet he used the term we. So clearly he is operating like he is a personal attorney or a defense attorney for the president and not the Attorney General.
Right, and that's not a good thing.
And that's the strongest argument we got right now.
Yeah, there you go. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program, and it's 48 minutes past the hour. You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. George in Alsip, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks to both of you for all you do for pointing us in the right direction every day. Something's puzzled me for a while. We're all familiar with the Saturday Night Massacre where Nixon wanted to get rid of Archibald Cox, and he ordered the Attorney General, Richardson, to fire him. Richardson wouldn't, so he fired Richardson. Deputy Attorney General Ruckelshaus wouldn't fire Cox, so Nixon fired him. And then he got to Robert Bork, who was happy to go along with Nixon, and he fired Archibald Cox. Now, in this administration, we've heard that Trump wanted his White House counsel, Don McGahn, to fire the special prosecutor. Don McGahn was the counterpart of John Dean in the Nixon administration. I don't see how the White House counsel was in the line of authority to fire a special prosecutor in the Justice Department. Is this just another example of Trump not knowing or not caring anything about the Constitution or how the government works?
Yeah, George, I think what he was doing is trying to get Don McGahn to get others to get rid of who had the ability. The president didn't want to make the call directly. He was having Don McGahn try to get it done. And when you read the Mueller report, what's interesting is the president right now's big contention is he never asked McGahn to have Mueller fired. But if you read the language, it's I'm going to paraphrase, but basically it's, he has to be gone, he shouldn't be there. I mean, it's everything but using the word fired. And the president, I think, knows that. But I also think the fact that they defied his order multiple times, employees of his, from violating the law, shows also they don't have an enormous amount of respect for a guy who doesn't have the competence to be in the White House. And I think that's what really stood out to me was that some of these people did put country above party or president and just ignored him, which we didn't see maybe happen during the Nixon era. So I think the big controversy, though, right now, and that's why we want Don McGahn to come in, is it's very clear. The intention was the president wanted Mueller fired. However, he was trying to have McGahn be the person to get it done through various channels. But he never used the magic words, and that seems to be Donald Trump's defense.
Thomas in Rancho Palos Verdes, California, listening on KPFK. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Congressman, thanks for taking our calls. I was just wondering what your position was on the current situation in Venezuela. We've seen John Bolton go on record and say that this is, the U.S. is involved in a multitude of ways and that this is specifically because of oil to some capacity. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on our involvement there.
Yeah, I mean, we've led a few letters from members of the Progressive Caucus against our intervention in another country's affairs. We have, most recently, we're supporting David Cicilline's got a bill that says no intervention without a vote of Congress, which should be anyway required, but an explicit bill saying that, and we're trying to get a vote on that because especially now with what happened yesterday, we think that's important. Clearly the United States shouldn't be involved in another country, whatever country that is, in any attempts of a coup or anything else that's happening. And, it is, I'm not defending the Maduro government. I think people are having an especially hard time, especially the poor in the country, but it's not ours to decide. And if the U.S. is going to be involved in any way, there has to be a debate and a vote in Congress. And we're really trying to get the David Cicilline bill to get a vote. And I think that's the best path we can do at this point.
Brian in Grant, Michigan, listening on AM 1680. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, Tom. And Congressman, thank you for coming on the show every week. I understand that precious and few are the moments you Pocans share. But my question is, what is the Progressive Caucus going to be doing to help get publicity for candidates who are not Joe Biden? It seems like it's because he's the one that the oligarchs like. All we're seeing on the news is all Biden all the time.
Yeah, well, and that's been, I think, since he announced especially, right? So we've seen the little peak. And I think you're going to have peaks for lots of candidates, right? I mean, Buttigieg had his moment a little while ago, and now Biden's got it because he just announced. And I think every few weeks we're going to see different peaks happen. People go up and down. It's pretty early yet from the primaries. We don't get involved in presidential elections per se, but we're trying to work with all the campaigns to look at progressive policy issues, whether it be Medicare for all, debt-free college proposals, the investments in infrastructure. I mean, go on and on. We've got a list of things we're reaching out to folks. And I think we just had a conversation this morning, and I believe the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center, which is a nonprofit, they're talking about at their annual summit, where a lot of our members will attend, as well as members of the public who are progressive with a lot of progressive groups. The presidential candidates will likely be invited. So we may have an opportunity to really highlight progressive issues with candidates that choose to come. So we'll find ways to do it like that, but we never officially endorse. Individual members may. Right now, our focus is to get all the candidates to look at progressive issues and take them up in their campaign, because that's the best way we're going to win in 2020.
Bill in St. Paul, Minnesota, listening to 950 AM. We have about a minute, a little more than a minute, Bill. A quick question for Congressman Pocan, please.
Yeah, referencing Trump supporters working in middle class, and if billionaire money goes mostly to Republicans, you could say that the billionaires don't care about us, and how come working in middle class Trump supporters don't get that? That's a real salient point for me. It drives me nuts, and I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Bill, I agree with you. I mean, I look at a lot of the people who voted for Donald Trump because their economic condition hasn't gotten better. It's not, because of anything other than the greed that we see and the income diverse, the consolidation on the top. A lot of the policies that have happened, people should realize Republicans are not on their side. But then when they're told that the problem really is that person with brown or black skin, and if they wind up actually believing that's the problem and not the top 1 to 3% of folks putting the squeeze on everyone else just to get richer, then we have the problems that we have, and people look to someone like Donald Trump, who is a demagogue, and his message seems to resonate. We need to stand up to that and make sure people understand what the real conditions are. And Congressman, in the last 10 seconds here, what should we be looking for in the next week? We're back in session a lot. I think out of the next 13 weeks, 11 of the next 13, or maybe it's 13 of the next 15, a lot. So a lot of action is going to happen, and people should be contacting their representatives on anything they care about. Great. Thank you, Congressman, so much for being with us today. Yeah, thank you, Tom. Great talking with you. Congressman Mark Pocan, co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan. We'll be back. Bernie Sanders is going to drop by. Also, Greg Palast is going to drop by, get a Venezuela update. And we'll be continuing to take your calls on the issues of the day. And, of course, if the Barr hearing fires back up again, we'll be carrying that.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
From UN headquarters in New York.
We say fight back!
We are reading from the Mueller report. This is from page 5. It's the subset of Russian contacts with the campaign. Spring 2016. Campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos made early contact with Joseph Mifsud, a London-based professor who had connections to Russia and traveled to Moscow in April 2016. Immediately upon his return to London from that trip, Mifsud told Papadopoulos that the Russian government had dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. 1 week later, in the first week of May 2016, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to candidate Clinton. Throughout that period of time, and for several months thereafter, Papadopoulos worked with Mifsud and 2 Russian nationals to arrange a meeting between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. No meeting took place. September 2016. Russian outreach to the Trump campaign continued into the summer of 2016 as candidate Trump was becoming the presumptive Republican nominee for president. On June 9th, 2016, for example, a Russian lawyer met with senior Trump campaign officials Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and campaign chairman Paul Manafort to deliver what the email proposed the meeting had described as, quote, official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary, end quote. The materials were offered to Trump Jr. as, quote, part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, end quote. The written communications setting up the meeting showed that the campaign anticipated receiving information from Russia that could assist candidate Trump's electoral prospects, but the Russian lawyer's presentation did not provide such information. Days after the June 9 meeting, and on June 14, 2016, a cybersecurity firm and the DNC announced that Russian government hackers had infiltrated the DNC and obtained access to opposition research on candidate Trump, among other documents. In July 2016, campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page traveled in his personal capacity to Moscow and gave the keynote address at the New Economic School. Page had lived and worked in Russia between 2003 and 2007. After returning to the United States, Page became acquainted with at least 2 Russian intelligence officers, one of whom was later charged in 2015 with conspiracy to act as an unregistered agent of Russia. Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow and his advocacy for pro-Russian foreign policy drew media attention. The campaign then distanced itself from Page and by late September 2016 removed him from the campaign. July 2016 was also the month WikiLeaks first released emails stolen by the GRU from the DNC. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks posted thousands of internal DNC documents revealing information about the Clinton campaign. Within days, there was public reporting that U.S. intelligence agencies had high confidence that the Russian government was behind the theft of emails and documents from the DNC. And within a week of the release, a foreign government informed the FBI about its May 2016 interaction with Papadopoulos and his statement that the Russian government could assist the Trump campaign. On July 31, 2016, based on the foreign government reporting, the FBI opened an investigation into potential coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Separately, on August 2, 2016, Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort met in New York City with his longtime business associate Konstantin Kilimnik, who the FBI assesses to have ties to Russian intelligence. Kilimnik requested the meeting to deliver in person a peace plan for Ukraine that Manafort acknowledged to the special counsel's office was a, quote, backdoor, end quote, way for Russia to control part of eastern Ukraine. Both men believe the plan would require candidate Trump's assent to succeed were he to be elected president. They also discussed the status of the Trump campaign and Manafort's strategy for winning Democratic votes in Midwestern states. Months before that meeting, Manafort had caused internal polling data to be shared with Kilimnik, and the sharing continued for some period of time after their August meeting. Fall 2016. On October 7, 2016, the media released video of candidate Trump speaking in graphic terms about women years earlier, which was considered damaging to his candidacy. Less than an hour later, WikiLeaks made its second release. Thousands of John Podesta's emails that had been stolen by the GRU in late March of 2016. The FBI and other U.S. government institutions were at the time continuing their investigation of suspected Russian government efforts to interfere in the presidential election. That same day, October 7th, the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence issued a joint public statement that, quote, the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations, end quote. Those thefts and the disclosures of the hacked materials through online platforms such as WikiLeaks, the statement continued, quote, are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process, end quote. Post-2016 election. Immediately after the November 8 election, Russian government officials and prominent Russian businessmen began to make inroads into the new administration. The most senior levels of the Russian government encouraged these efforts. The Russian embassy made contact hours after the election to congratulate the president-elect and arrange a call with President Putin. It's the Mueller report. You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, you know, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Elections, as well as related counts of identity theft. It's the Mueller report.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. We're going to pick up the Barr hearings in just a few minutes. Right now, Senator Kennedy, the Republican from Louisiana, is interrogating the Attorney General, who has, in my opinion, for at least the third time, lied to the American people and to Congress under oath this morning. I mean, just this morning. And when Sheldon Whitehouse got him actually stuttering, I mean, it was a beautiful thing to behold. It was just an amazing, amazing thing. And you know, so here, Amy Klobuchar is asking questions. Let's check this out.
Under oath, you had to go out of your way not to at least mention the fact that he had sent you this letter, but you didn't mention it. And then finally, I would say that we must hear from Director Mueller, because in response to some of my colleagues' questions, you have said that you didn't know what he meant or why he said it, and I believe we need to hear from him. So I want to first start with Russia. Special Counsel Mueller's report found that the Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election in a sweeping and systematic fashion. Later, Director Wray has informed us that 2018 was a dress rehearsal for the big show in 2020. Director Coates, the president's intelligence advisor, has told us that the Russians are getting bolder. Yet for the last 2 years, Senator Langford and I, on a bipartisan bill with support from the ranking and the head of the Intelligence Committee, have been trying to get the Secure Elections Act passed. This would require backup paper ballots. If anyone gets federal funding for an election, it would require audits, and it would require better cooperation. Yet, the White House, just as we were on the verge of getting a markup in the Rules Committee, getting it to the floor where I think we would get the vast majority of senators, the White House made calls to stop this. Were you aware of that?
No.
Okay, well, that happened. So what I would like to know from you as our nation's chief law enforcement officer, if you will work with Senator Langford and I to get this bill done, because otherwise we are not going to have any clout to get backup paper ballots if something goes wrong in this election.
Well, I will work with you to enhance the security of our election, and I'll take a look at at what you're proposing. I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, well, it is the bipartisan bill. It has Senator Burr and Senator Warner. Its support from Senator Graham was on the bill. Senator Harris is on the bill. And the leads are Senator Langford and myself. And it had significant support in the House as well. The GRU, the Russian Military Intelligence Agency, targeted the U.S. state and local agencies along with private firms that are responsible for electoral and voter registration. The GRU accessed voter information and installed malware on a voting technology company's network. I understand the FBI will brief U.S. Senator Rick Scott and Florida Governor DeSantis on efforts by Russian hackers to gain access to Florida election data. Will you commit to have the FBI provide a briefing to all senators on this?
Just on the Florida situation?
On the entire Russia situation,
sure,
including the Florida situation. Sure. Okay, that will be helpful. Again, Senator Langford and I are trying to get our bill passed, and I think if everyone hears about this, it may help. Also, according to the report, the IRA purchased over 3,500 ads on Facebook to undermine our democracy. As the chairman has pointed out, contrary to what we heard from a high-ranking official at the White House, this was not just a few Facebook ads. I am pleased that Chairman Graham has agreed to be the lead Republican on the Honest Ads Act that I introduced last year with Senator McCain. And will you help us to try at least to change our election laws so that we can show where the money is coming from and who's paying for these ads so that people have access to these ads?
It's interesting. Two pieces of legislation that she's introduced in a row.
Thank you.
Is this a
We need that
campaign?
support. Now let's go to something I noted in your in the opening. You talked about how the two major concerns at your nomination hearing were about the report and about making the report public. There was a third concern, and it was something I raised, and that was your views on obstruction. I asked you if a president or any person convincing a witness to change testimony would be obstruction of justice, and you said yes. The report found that Michael Cohen's testimony to the House before it, that the president repeatedly implied that Cohen's family members had committed crimes. Do you consider that evidence to be an attempt to convince a witness to change testimony?
No. I don't think that could pass muster. Those public statements he was making could pass muster as subordination of perjury.
But this is a man in the highest office, in the most powerful job in our country, and he is basically, I'm trying to think how someone would react, any of my colleagues here, if the President of the United States is implying, getting out there that your family members have committed a crime. So you don't consider that any attempt to change testimony?
Well, you have two different things. You have the question of whether it's an obstructive act, and then also whether or not it is a corrupt intent. I don't think general public statements like that we could show that they would have sufficiently probable effect to constitute.
Okay, well then let's go to some private statements. The report found that the president's personal counsel told Paul Manafort that he would be, quote, taken care of. This is in volume 2, page 123 to 24. That you don't consider obstruction of justice?
No, not standing alone, both for this, on both the same reasons.
And I think that is my point here.
What?
You look at the totality of the evidence. That's what I learned when I was in law school. You look at the totality of the evidence and the pattern here. Look at this. The report found that the president's personal counsel told Michael Cohen that if he stayed on message about the Trump Tower Moscow project, the president had his back. That's volume 2, page 140.
Right, but I think that the counsel acknowledged that it's unclear whether he was reflecting the president's statements on that.
Okay, the report found that after Manafort was convicted, the president himself called him a brave man for refusing to break.
Yes, and that is not obstruction, because the president's the evidence. I think what the president's lawyers would say, if this were ever actually joined, is that the president's statements about flipping are quite clear and express and uniformly the same, which is by flipping, he meant succumbing to pressure on unrelated cases to lie and compose in order to get lenient treatment on
Again,
other cases. That is not, so discouraging flipping in that sense is not obstruction.
Okay, well, look at the pattern here. The report found that after Cohen's residence and office were searched by the FBI, the president told Cohen to hang in there and stay strong. The report found that after National Security Advisor Michael Flynn resigned, the president made public positive comments about him, and then when he cooperated, he changed his tune. During your confirmation hearing, I asked you whether a president deliberately impairing the integrity or availability of evidence would be obstruction. And you responded yes. And this is a different take on Senator Feinstein's question. Would causing McGahn, the White House counsel, to create a false record when the president ordered him to have the when McGahn, he told him to deny reports, right? He tells McGahn, deny reports that the president ordered him to have the counsel fired. If you don't see that as obstruction and directing him to change testimony, do you think that would create a false record to impair the integrity of evidence?
This is extraordinary. Amy Klobuchar is giving Bill Barr an absolute ass-kicking. Back to it.
Sufficient to establish any of the three elements there. First, it's not sufficient to show a obstructive act because it is unclear whether the president knew that to be false. In fact, the president's focus on the fact that I never told you to fire McGahn. Did I ever say fire? I never told you to fire McGahn. McGahn's.
And I'm getting at something, it's about impairing the integrity of the evidence. I just see it as different. This is.
Well, the second thing, it's hard to establish the nexus to the proceeding because he already had testified to the special counsel. He'd given his evidence. As the report itself says, there is evidence that the president actually thought and believed that the Times article was wrong. That's evidence on the president's side of the ledger, that he actually thought it was wrong and was asking for its correction. It is also possible, the report says, that the president's intent was directed at the publicity and the press. The government has to prove things beyond a reasonable doubt, and as the report shows, there's ample evidence on the other side of the ledger that would prevent the government from establishing that.
Okay, again, I look at the totality of the evidence, and when you look at it, it is a pattern, and that is different than having one incident. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. Senator Sass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Barr, I'd like to go back
Ben
to...
Sass is the Republican senators coming in to ask questions. So we're going to take a break here. We'll be back. We're going to pick up your phone calls as well in a few minutes. It's 16 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Your thoughts on all of this. Bernie Sanders will be with us a little later on today, so stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, 16 minutes past the hour. Amy Klobuchar just did an absolutely spectacular job. And I so wish some of the other Democratic senators had been that good. We'll be right back. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back. Stick around. 17 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Rex in Boston, Mass. Hey, Rex, what's on your mind today?
Hello, I'm a first-time caller.
Well, thank you, Rex. What's on your mind?
Yes. I was wondering, why is Pelosi trying to make an infrastructure deal with the president we're trying to kick out?
Well, there's one of two ways to look at it, and the position that I took yesterday was that I thought it was a terrible mistake. I may well be wrong. The more I look at this, the more I think about it, the more I listen to other people's opinions, and I know a number of people initially shared my opinion as well. The more it looks like, they're basically playing him. Trump wants a big infrastructure deal. He knows it'll stimulate the economy. And what he doesn't understand is that it's going to take trillions of dollars to do it. And that means that he's going to have to undo his tax break, or he's going to have to put another $1 trillion in the national debt. And his own party will not go along with either of those things. And so there's not going to be an infrastructure deal. And the Democrats won't go along with an infrastructure deal that's purely privatized, which is what Trump had campaigned on. So I think that by agreeing to this, you know, sort of like when Trump met, the last time Trump met with them in a fairly high-profile fashion, he said, yep, I'm going to shut down the government. And then he did, and that really hurt him badly. So this may well end up hurting him quite badly, Rex. We'll see. We'll see. You know, it's high-stakes poker here. James in Spokane, Washington. Hey, James, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Sure, Tom. Make America great again. Or grape again, I'm sorry.
Grape. Okay.
Hey, something's got to be done to protect our democracy. It's a travesty when guys like Elliot Abrams and William Barr can do the things they've done in the past, sometimes getting convicted of crimes, totally discredited, and then they come back into our democracy, government, and mess.
Well, it was William Barr who got Elliot Abrams pardoned.
I know. That's what I mean. They should be excluded from government service after that point.
I agree.
Come on.
I agree. And it's not just Elliot Abrams. I mean, there's a bunch of them. But yeah.
And the other thing, my head is on fire about Tom. Why are we not getting in the streets? It speaks so badly to our apathy and degree of complacency at this point. They stole another $1.5 trillion from us.
Yeah.
I want that money back.
There you go, James.
I want the money back.
I think that we are metaphorically taking to the streets, and we're seeing this all across the country. That instead of pouring out into the physical streets, people are pouring out into the electronic streets. They're showing up on Facebook, Twitter, all of your social media out there, YouTube and whatnot, and just absolutely raising hell. And I think that that's having as much impact, and arguably even more impact. I mean, look at how a couple $100,000 was apparently spent by the Internet Research Agency in 2016, and it reached over 100 million Americans, those messages, about the Pope endorsed Trump, and Trump is a wonderful guy, and Hillary, this, that, and the other thing. I think that Americans are engaged, James. It just doesn't look the same as it did back, in the 60s when I was out in the streets.
I so hope you're right, Tom.
Yeah, I hope so, too. But it really, really, truly looks that way. And if you look at and also, the dynamics are somewhat different right now. You've got people who have, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. Makes it harder to take time off work and go out in the streets. You've got people working for lower wages than they were 40 years ago. Makes it harder to get out in the streets or even take a chance of losing your job. So, Reaganomics has just really whacked this country badly. And I think that's why people are taking to social media instead. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. This election coming up is going to be fascinating. We put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, all you have to do is go over to ThomHartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And I'm, as Ben Sass is, I've not found it. It's interesting. Fox News is cutting away and having commentary whenever a Democrat is questioning Barr. I'm cutting away and having commentary whenever a Republican is, because from my point of view, the Republicans are just saying the same old, same old. Oh, let's talk about Hillary Clinton and whether or not she acid washed her server, completely ignoring the fact that before any acid washing or deleting or anything was done, a complete copy of her server was delivered to the FBI. everybody seems to forget that. It's like there were never any missing emails. It's just incredible. Anyhow, Joseph in East Bern, New York. Hey, Joseph, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I've got a question about Mr. McConnell. A couple of weeks ago, I heard an article on, I think it was CNN, that Mr. McConnell's wife had received $1.3 million from a bank in Crete, somehow connected to the same bank that Mr. Putin has put his stolen trillions from his own people in. I haven't heard a word about it since.
Yeah.
It was like squashed totally.
I don't know. I've seen several stories about Elaine Chao is Mitch McConnell's wife, and she's the transportation secretary, I believe, in the current cabinet, and she was also in the, I think the Bush cabinet, maybe the In any case, and her family is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She's of Taiwanese ancestry. I'm not sure if she was born in Taiwan or the United States. And her family is massive. I mean, mega mogul, multimillionaire shipping family. And they ship product all over the world and presumably do business with Russia just like everybody, any other shipping company would all over the world. So,
So you don't think this is the Republicans being paid off by Putin to keep Trump in power?
I doubt it. I mean, I think that I've seen a number of articles that question whether Elaine Chao's family business practices have compromised her integrity, or Mitch McConnell's for that matter, and whether they have brought, other billionaires around the world or multi-millionaires around the world who are affiliated with their business who might have, perhaps even corrupt intent, into helping to fund Mitch McConnell's campaigns. I mean, Mitch McConnell, when he married Elaine Chao, he instantly became a multimillionaire. And, the questions about how is that impacting his campaigns and how is that, where are the ethics on all that? Those are all clear, problematic and reasonable questions. But the specific one you're talking about, money from Russia, I don't know the details on, Bill, or Joseph, I'm sorry. Bill in Inglewood, California. Hey, Bill, what's up? Got a minute to the break.
Hey, Tom, I salute you, brother. I've been listening to you for years.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, my pleasure, I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are about the new tax law.
You're talking about the GOP tax scam from 2 years ago? The giant tax cut for billionaires?
Well, the one that started in January where all of a sudden after all these years of breaking even or maybe getting a return, now I'm told after a 1031 I still owe $9,000 in taxes.
Right.
For what?
Right.
I don't see any justification.
It's, what they did when they passed this tax break, this $1.5 trillion tax break for billionaires and big corporations. They wanted to pay for part of it, and so they raised, for example, people, Gold Star families who have a service member who dies, they get like this $15,000 a year compensation of some sort. Now it's being taxed at like $5,000 a year or something like that, instead of around the old tax of $1,000. And so, there's a bunch of stuff like that going on, Bill, and you've also lost a lot of deductions. So basically, they're paying for their billionaire subsidy, but, on the back of middle-class people like you, Bill. That's what's going on. Thanks a lot for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with your calls, the bar hearings, and, and Bernie's going to be with us, too, at some point, right after this. We are reading from the Mueller report. This is from page 5. It's the subset of Russian contacts with the campaign. Spring 2016. Campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos made early contact with Joseph Mifsud, a London-based professor who had connections to Russia and traveled to Moscow in April 2016. Immediately upon his return to London from that trip, Mifsud told Papadopoulos that the Russian government had dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. 1 week later, in the first week of May 2016, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to candidate Clinton. Throughout that period of time, and for several months thereafter, Papadopoulos worked with Mifsud and 2 Russian nationals to arrange a meeting between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. No meeting took place. September 2016, Russian outreach to the Trump campaign continued into the summer of 2016 as candidate Trump was becoming the presumptive Republican nominee for president. On June 9th, 2016, for example, a Russian lawyer met with senior Trump campaign officials Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and campaign chairman Paul Manafort to deliver what the email proposed the meeting had described as, quote, official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary, end quote. The materials were offered to Trump Jr. as, quote, part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, end quote. The written communications setting up the meeting showed that the campaign anticipated receiving information from Russia that could assist candidate Trump's electoral prospects, but the Russian lawyer's presentation did not provide such information. Days after the June 9 meeting, and on June 14, 2016, a cybersecurity firm and the DNC announced that Russian government hackers had infiltrated the DNC and obtained access to opposition research on candidate Trump, among other documents. In July 2016, campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page traveled in his personal capacity to Moscow and gave the keynote address at the New Economic School. Page had lived and worked in Russia between 2003 and 2007. After returning to the United States, Page became acquainted with at least 2 Russian intelligence officers, one of whom was later charged in 2015 with conspiracy to act as an unregistered agent of Russia. Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow and his advocacy for pro-Russian foreign policy drew media attention. The campaign then distanced itself from Page and by late September 2016 removed him from the campaign. July 2016 was also the month WikiLeaks first released emails stolen by the GRU from the DNC. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks posted thousands of internal DNC documents revealing information about the Clinton campaign. Within days, there was public reporting that U.S. intelligence agencies had high confidence that the Russian government was behind the theft of emails and documents from the DNC. And within a week of the release, a foreign government informed the FBI about its May 2016 interaction with Papadopoulos and his statement that the Russian government could assist the Trump campaign. On July 31, 2016, based on the foreign government reporting, the FBI opened an investigation into potential coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Separately, on August 2, 2016, Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort met in New York City with his longtime business associate Konstantin Kilimnik, who the FBI assesses to have ties to Russian intelligence. Kilimnik requested the meeting to deliver in person a peace plan for Ukraine that Manafort acknowledged to the special counsel's office was a, quote, backdoor, end quote, way for Russia to control part of eastern Ukraine. Both men believe the plan would require candidate Trump's assent to succeed were he to be elected president. They also discussed the status of the Trump campaign and Manafort's strategy for winning Democratic votes in Midwestern states. Months before that meeting, Manafort had caused internal polling data to be shared with Kilimnik, and the sharing continued for some period of time after their August meeting. Fall 2016. On October 7th, 2016, the media released video of candidate Trump speaking in graphic terms about women years earlier, which was considered damaging to his candidacy. Less than an hour later, WikiLeaks made its second release. Thousands of John Podesta's emails that had been stolen by the GRU in late March of 2016. The FBI and other U.S. government institutions were at the time continuing their investigation of suspected Russian government efforts to interfere in the presidential election. That same day, October 7th, the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence issued a joint public statement that, quote, the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations, end quote. Those thefts and the disclosures of the hacked materials through online platforms such as WikiLeaks, the statement continued, quote, are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process, end quote. Post-2016 election. Immediately after the November 8 election, Russian government officials and prominent Russian businessmen began to make inroads into the new administration. The most senior levels of the Russian government encouraged these efforts. The Russian embassy made contact hours after the election to congratulate the president-elect and arrange a call with President Putin. It's the Mueller report. You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this Senator
Chris
It's absolutely
Coons
free. Delaware is asking questions of Barr and making a comment right now. Here it is.
Purpose for which he was appointed. I think we need to hear from Special Counsel Mueller. I think we need to hear from Don McGahn. And I think we need to review how we are going to handle going forward the fact that you are supervising 12 ongoing cases that came out of the Mueller investigation and have been referred. This body has a central role in oversight that I believe we need to exercise, given your recent record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So that was Chris Coons, and now it flips over to a Republican. Oh no, we can't. I'm sorry. We won't have time. Josh in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Hey, Josh, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Good to talk to you again. You know, I know we've been talking a lot about Trump, a lot of the issues that we're seeing now in the news and around the country, and I know we talk a lot about can we impeach Trump, and we definitely should try. And even if we did, I know that the underlying problems would still remain. So we still need to do things like the previous caller mentioned, protect our democracy. Some will say get money out of politics. And as you said, we are pouring out into the streets, digital streets. And but I think that we need to focus our efforts on that. And I always like to remind people that really the only way to get anything done is we have to encourage progressives across the country to really consider running for a local office and to support those running in 2019. And, I'd love to ask you, and by the way, it's great to hear that Bernie's going to be on later. Maybe, I don't know if this can be a topic that you guys discuss, but why is winning at the local level so important to our bottom-up, progressive revolution?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And Josh, do I have it right that you're running for office?
I'm not.
Oh, you just were bringing up the issue. I see. Okay.
I bring up the issue. What I did was when Bernie lost in 2016, or when he was getting close to, he asked for unprecedented grassroots organization, and I said I've got to help in some way. So what I did is I started a nationwide organization to do just that: encourage progressives to run for local office and support those who do. It's a singular.
Cool. What's the website? Is there a website for it we should know about?
Yeah, sure. It's localberniecrats.com.
Cool.
And we're also, we have local chapters across the country, over 200 local chapters,
right.
All run by volunteers. We don't ask for donations. We just ask people to donate directly to a candidate of their choice. That website has two lists. You can find a list of Berniecrat candidates who are running in your area. They would apply to be listed on our site, so they fill out a policy survey and everything. I'm going to be revamping it to make it a little bit easier to get more candidates listed, but those who do take the policy survey will have a better listing. And we also have a list of local chapters. So for your state, you can look for two different lists, and you can toggle between them and see how these candidates are answering the policy surveys and everything. So, yeah, this is my contribution, and I encourage you and anybody else in the media, and even Bernie, as regularly as possible, please ask people to run for local office and above, of course.
Yeah.
But that local foundational level, it's just so important. And maybe you could talk about why you feel it's so important, that local level is so important to that.
Oh, well, obviously, the local level, first of all, is where people learn how to do politics. Second, and so you're building a farm team. I mean, we've got many places in the United States where literally no Democrat is even on the ticket. And even if you're going to lose, I mean, get on the ticket and figure it out, number one. And number two, I'd say beyond running for local office, running for committee precinct person or precinct committee person, or any other role in your local Democratic Party. Yeah, these party positions are very powerful. These are the folks who write the platforms. They're the ones who decide who's going to be on the primary ballots. These are very, very, these are extraordinarily important positions. So, Josh, thank you. Good on you, and that's great what you're doing. Roy, I'm sorry, Rav in Iron Mountain, Minnesota. Hey, Rav, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Talk about a classic example, one of those old movies, White Men Speak with Forked Tongue. Remember those?
Yeah, I do.
Republicans and Democrats, when the Republicans get on, he doesn't have to answer anything. That's all he does is sit there and listen.
Right.
All of a sudden, when the Democrats come on, he's got to answer something. The one thing that I did want to bring up is if Trump has nothing to hide, how come he hides everything?
Yeah, well, and that's the question. And not only that, what is he hiding? Yesterday I was reading this article in either the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Financial Times. I'm sorry, those are the three news apps that I read on my phone a lot, and I was reading on my phone. But about Deutsche Bank. It was like this deep dive into Deutsche Bank and the history and, their history with Trump and how they've loaned him over $2 billion over the years, and how he owed them several $100 million, and he couldn't pay them back. And this was back about a decade ago, and he couldn't pay them back, and so he sued them. And so they said, "Okay, that's all right. We'll just, don't pay us back. It's cool." And it suddenly hit me: what if Donald Trump is literally broke? What if ever since his bankruptcies in the late 90s, this guy has just been running off cash flow? He is literally spending his cash flow, or he's spending the money he borrowed from Deutsche Bank that he didn't pay back. I mean, it's been 20 years. If he took $300 million from Deutsche Bank and just kept it, that's $15 million a year over a 20-year period. You can live large with $15 million a year. And then on top of that, he's got income from some of his properties and this, that, and the other thing. So, but what if he's just literally, if you were to take all the loans that he has and subtract them from his net worth and from his actual, whatever he's got in the bank, what if he's just broke? I think that would justify, this insane dance that he's been doing to get out. So, Richard Blumenthal just picked up the questioning here, Rob. I gotta run. So back to the hearings. Here we go.
Supported my conclusion. You were asked by Representative Chris. Excuse me, Senator. That conclusion was not related to my description of the findings in the March 24th letter. That conclusion refers to my conclusion on the obstruction cases. So it's a different conclusion.
Exactly the same
conclusions that was used by Special Counsel Mueller. And on the obstruction issue, at page 8 and 182 of the report, I don't know whether you have it in front of you, the special counsel specifically said, at the same time, I'm quoting, "If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state." He said it again at page 182, and yet in your summary and in the press conference that you did, you in effect cleared the president on both so-called collusion. Yeah, the difference is I used the proper standard. That statement you just read is actually a very strange statement for a prosecutor. 4 of the specific obstruction episodes, Robert Mueller concluded that there was substantial evidence on the 3 necessary elements of obstruction. Well, you're a prosecutor. I have to finish my question. Okay. Well, you haven't let me finish my answer. Well, let me just finish the question.
We can do both.
All right, good. You ignored in that press conference and in the summary that Robert Mueller found substantial evidence, and it's in the report. And we have a chart that shows the elements of that crime: intent, interference with an ongoing investigation, and
the obstructive act. So I think that your credibility is undermined within the department, in this committee, and with the American people. And I want to ask you whether on those remaining investigations, the 12 to 14 investigations, whether you have had any communication with anyone in the White House.
No.
And will you give us an ironclad commitment that you will in no way
By the way,
interfere?
I'm not sure, the laundry list of investigations, but I certainly haven't talked the substance or been directed to do anything on any of the cases.
Well, let me give you an opportunity to clarify.
Yeah.
Have you had any conversations with anyone in the White House about those ongoing investigations that were spawned or spun off by...
I don't recall having any substantive discussion on the investigation.
Have you had any non-substantive discussion?
I mean, it's possible that a name of a case was mentioned.
And have you provided information about any of those ongoing investigations? Any information whatsoever?
I don't recall, no.
You don't recall?
I don't recall providing any.
Wouldn't you recall about whether you gave information to somebody in the White House about an ongoing criminal investigation in the Southern District of New York, or the Eastern District of New York, or the Eastern District of Virginia, or the Department of Justice?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't recall providing any substantive information about a case.
Is there anything that would refresh your recollection?
If
I don't recall is lawyer code for I am lying to you.
But
anyhow, that's Richard Blumenthal, the senator from, where's he from? Wherever. Anyhow, he's a good Democrat, and he is grilling someplace out east. He's grilling Connecticut. Thank you. He's grilling Bill Barr and making him look like an absolute fool. It's extraordinary. We'll be checking in with Talk Media News in a few minutes to find out what's going on in the world. Stick around. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We're carrying the Barr hearings. We'll have Bernie in the next hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And if you have the ability to check it out, the New York Times is carrying an op-ed by Mr. Comey that is absolutely breathtaking. And welcome back. Brian in Dubuque, Iowa. Hey, Brian, thanks for calling. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thank you. I just want to really quick, I had two comments very quick. If we don't pick Bernie as our nominee, it's not good. It's not going to be good.
Brian, I think that there's several good candidates here, and even if we end up with a candidate that is not, quote, a progressive or that takes money from big corporations or whatever.
It's better than the alternative, I understand.
Oh, God, yes.
I don't want to make the almost perfect the enemy of the good.
Right.
You know, I'm kind of sick of that phrase.
Yeah.
But my buddy who's kind of a Trumper, I don't know if you're familiar with the HBO special about Oak Park River Forest High School.
I'm not.
Okay, it's a diverse high school, and they did a special on it recently because of its diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the high school that I went to and my brothers graduated from.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it borders the west side of Chicago. It's a border town. You can see the Sears Tower from a block from my house when I used to was a kid, and you'd walk up on the bridge over the Eisenhower Expressway, and you could see the top half almost of the Sears Tower.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I moved from Oak Park to Downers Grove when I was 15 and a half and started going to high school in Downers Grove, and I met a bunch of other kids out there, a lot more rural. It's about 40 minutes on the highway outside of where I grew up. And nice kids and everything, but my one buddy's kind of a right-winger. But I know he's a good guy at heart, but he's just
Brian, where are you going with this?
Well, I was just going to say that he got a $2,000 tax break last year, but this year he's got to pay $6,000 in taxes. That's it, Tom.
So
Thanks a lot.
Trump kicked his butt. Does he realize that Trump got him?
Oh, he wasn't happy.
Yeah, okay. Brian, thanks for that. That's a fascinating story. I appreciate it. Joe in Elm Grove, Wisconsin. Hey, Joe, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
This is me?
This is you, and we've got a minute, 15
Okay.
seconds, Joe. Quick one.
The question was on compromise. Why just Trump? Why do we think that compromise wasn't spread out further?
Oh, I think the odds are fairly high that it was. I'm wondering, I've been often wondering, why is it that Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and a number of the other kind of high-ranking Republican senators seem to have absolutely no interest. Amy Klobuchar pointed it out in her questioning of Barr. There's bipartisan legislation to tighten up our elections before the 2020 election so that, Russians and others, by the way, I would expect a half a dozen countries are probably trying to hack our elections now that they know it can be done, so that they can't do that. And, why would the Russians be opposed to that? Excuse me, why would the Republicans be opposed to that? And, it's a question that I don't have an answer for unless they, either it is just total fealty, butt kissing for Donald Trump, or they're getting money indirectly from Russian oligarchs, through, the NRA apparently has funneled tens of millions of dollars, out of Russia. And it's not just Russia, by the way. You've got billionaires all over the world who've been kicking money in and trying to influence our election. And it's wrong, and it's all compromise, in my opinion. Joe, thanks. But you've asked the question, right, Joe? The question is, what the hell is going on with the Republican Party, and why are they just fine with all this? There's something rotten in Denmark, as the old saying goes. We'll be back with Ellen Ratner and Talk Media News. Stick around. It's, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, the new book by Ellen Ratner. On the line with us, Ellen Ratner herself. Hey, Ellen, so what's going on in the world today?
Well, thank you. First of all, I wanted to just say something about your last caller who talked about how different the school system was in Chicago. Well, Cleveland, Ohio had a school system where I grew up, and it was called the Ludlow Experiment, and they actually had African Americans buy white people's houses and then go to the school system. So the school was very integrated. We're about to have our 50th anniversary of our high school graduation, if you can believe it.
Sounds like that would make a great documentary.
Well, I think there's actually been a documentary made before that, but now people are talking about it, so that's very interesting. Huh. And, of course, one of our classmates was one of the first black congressmen in Ohio's daughter, so that's pretty interesting.
Wow. Cool. So what's up in the world?
Daughter. Okay. Well, so now we have the Barr-Mueller hearings, and this is Attorney General Barr. It was really interesting. I watched a fair amount of it today, and Lindsey Graham, as far as I'm concerned, these guys just prance around. They talk about bills that they're doing, what they're up to. I mean, this is a hearing. It's not supposed to be personal admiration, which is what they're doing about themselves. Anyway, they were pressed for summaries of the work. As you know, Bob Mueller wrote to Attorney General Barr and said that they wanted summaries of his work done. And then I forget which guy, because I have no memory of my ripe old age. But anyway, one of them said that spine was not a pejorative term, that it's just a term. Give me a break.
Yeah, Barr said that too. Barr, and it's so weird because he used it in a pejorative context. You know, he said, I don't think we should be spying on people. I mean, that's a negative. That's a pejorative context. But, you know, that's one of many lies he's told today.
Right. Well, you know, what can we say? I mean, he is obviously there. Now the question is whether he's going to testify tomorrow before the House committee. If he doesn't, there are people talking about getting rid of him. I don't really know what he's going to do. I think he's going to testify.
You know, John Mitchell went to prison for 19 months for obstruction of justice. It sure looks to me like Barr has committed multiple acts of obstruction of justice and lying to Congress. And I think he needs to be watching his backside. This guy could end up in prison.
Well, so I agree with you. And, you know, I mean, I'm like in shock that he's saying what he's saying, that he's doing what he's doing. But, hey, I'm not Mr. Barr.
Yeah, there you
go. But he's clearly supporting the president, no matter what.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, if you have a chance this afternoon, Ellen, James Comey has an op-ed. It just went up over on the New York Times. Where he asks, you know, how could people get sucked into this? And then he tells his own story. He says it starts when you're sitting in a cabinet meeting and the president is telling lies, and you can't interrupt him. You just sit there and nod your head, or it's, you know, he goes in television and you're with him and he tells lies, and you can't really interrupt him, and pretty soon just you're complicit because you essentially ratified his lies, and then he asks you for a little praise, and you give him a little praise because you rationalize it by saying, you know, well, I'm the good guy here. If I stick around, I can help out the country. And he goes through the step by step, and then he gets to the very end, and he says, and of course, you must be seen as being on his team, so you make further compromises, you use his language, praise his leadership, tout his commitment to values, and then the last sentence, and then you are lost. He has eaten your soul.
Well, you know what's really interesting? There's a new book out, which name I forgot, but it's about the president cheating, as I think it's called Cheater or something. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it's about the president cheating at golf.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah, it was.
I actually know somebody that played on one of his courses that said she talked to the caddy, and the caddy would go after the balls that were in the woods, that the president had put in the woods by his stroke, and move the ball to the green.
Yeah, I've heard stories like that. That's remarkable. You have it first or second hand. That's remarkable. So what else is up in the world, Ellen?
Okay. There's a lot else going on in the world. The president has said that he's going to declare the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. Turkey is giving him some grief about that, saying that they do other things other than being a terrorist organization. And so the president is in some trouble with our ally, a NATO member.
Yeah, he's trying to do what El-Sisi wants in Egypt. I mean, he just why does he do whatever strong men want?
Because he likes being a strong man.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Now, Julian Assange, and I want to just be very honest with you. I met with Julian Assange the Saturday before the Tuesday election at the Ecuadorian embassy in London.
And your brother was his lawyer.
Right. My brother was Julian Assange's lawyer. He was just given 50 weeks for jumping bail and winding up in the embassy, in the Ecuadorian embassy. Now, Thursday, there is another hearing about whether he should be sent to the United States. And so, of course, they're very upset that he was able to get access to certain files, et cetera.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens if they even maybe waive the prison and just send him directly to the United States. I don't know how this is going to play out, but it's fascinating to watch.
Well, we'll see how it plays out on Thursday, right?
Yep, amen. Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. We'll be back. Stick around. We're going to continue the hearings as Democrats are grilling Bill Barr and cover up General Barr, as William Safire used to refer to him back in the 90s, the last time he was the Attorney General. And Bernie Sanders is going to drop by.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
from Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor's report to the Justice Department about the Russian interference in the election and Donald Trump's role in it. This is from the introduction to Volume 1, page 1. The Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election in sweeping and systematic fashion. Evidence of Russian government operations began to surface in mid-2016. In June, the Democratic National Committee and its cyber response team publicly announced that Russian hackers had compromised its computer network. Releases of hacked materials, hacks that public reporting soon attributed to the Russian government, began that same month. Additional releases followed in July through the organization WikiLeaks, with further releases in October and November. In late July 2016, soon after WikiLeaks' first release of stolen documents, a foreign government contacted the FBI about a May 2016 encounter with Trump campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos had suggested to a representative of that foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications that from the Russian government, that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. That information prompted the FBI on July 31st, 2016, to open an investigation into whether individuals associated with the Trump campaign were coordinating with the Russian government in its interference activities. That fall, two federal agencies jointly announced that the Russian government, quote, directed recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including U.S. political organizations, and these thefts and disclosures are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process, end quote. After the election in late December 2016, the United States imposed sanctions on Russia for having interfered in the election. By early 2017, several congressional committees were examining Russia's interference in the election. Within the executive branch, these investigatory efforts ultimately led to the May 2017 appointment of Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III. The order appointing the special counsel authorized him to investigate, quote, the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, including any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. As set forth in detail in this report, the special counsel's investigation established that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election principally through two operations. First, a Russian entity carried out a social media campaign that favored presidential candidate Donald J. Trump and disparaged presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Second, a Russian intelligence service conducted counter-intrusion operations against entities, employees, and volunteers working on the Clinton campaign and then released stolen documents. The investigation also identified numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. Although the investigation established that the Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, and that the campaign expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Below, we describe the evidentiary considerations underpinning statements about the results of our investigation and the special counsel's charging decisions, and we then provide an overview of the 2 volumes of our report. The report describes actions and events that the special counsel's office found to be supported by the evidence collected in our investigation. In some instances, the report points out the absence of evidence or conflicts in the evidence about a particular fact or event. In other instances, when substantial, credible evidence enabled the office to reach the conclusion with confidence. Where that happened, the report states that the investigation established that certain actions or events occurred. A statement that the investigation did not establish particular facts does not mean there was no evidence of those facts. In evaluating whether evidence about collective action of multiple individuals constituted a crime, we applied the framework of conspiracy law, not the concept of collusion. In so doing, the office recognized that the word collude was used in communications with the acting attorney general, confirming certain aspects of the investigation's scope, and that the term has been frequently invoked in public reporting about the investigation. But collusion is not a specific offense or theory of liability found in the United States Code, nor is it a term of art in federal criminal law. For those reasons, the office's focus on analyzing questions of joint criminal liability was on conspiracy as defined in federal law. In connection with that analysis, we addressed the factual question whether members of the Trump campaign, quote, coordinated a term that appears in the appointment order, with Russian election interference activities. We understood coordination does not have a settled definition in federal criminal law. We understood coordination to require an agreement, tacit or express, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government on election interference. That requires more than the two parties taking actions that were informed by or responsive to the other's actions or interests. We applied the term coordination in that sense when stating in the report that the investigation did not establish that the Trump campaign coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. The report on our investigation consists of 2 volumes. Volume 1 describes the factual results of the special counsel's investigation of Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election and its interactions with the Trump campaign. Section 1 describes the scope of the investigation. Sections 2 and 3 describe the principal ways Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election. The Mueller report. You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, you know, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Senator Sanders, welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you, Tom, and congratulations on all the great work you do day after day, year after year.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on how well you and your campaign are doing here in this primary. I'm wondering, first of all, you know, Bill Barr testifying before the Senate today, and in many cases it seems, according to Pat Leahy anyway, filibustering and being deceptive. I wonder what your thoughts are on the Attorney General.
I think Leahy's absolutely right. I mean, what you're looking at is a kind of unique situation where the administration, through Barr, are refusing to give the information that the American people are entitled to have through the Congress. So I think he is stonewalling, and we have a right to know.
Yesterday, I understand in the Senate there were hearings on Medicare for All. I missed those, but I know this is a big issue for you. In fact, you're the one who really turned it into a national issue. What happened, and what are your thoughts on it?
Well, it's interesting. It's a big issue for me, but I think it's a big issue for the American people, Tom. And you know that we remain the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. You got 34 million people without any health insurance, yet even more who are underinsured. We pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. While the drug companies make billions in profit, 1 out of 5 Americans can't even afford the high prices that they're forced to pay. So I think, and the American people, I think, increasingly believe that the time is now to end private insurance domination over the healthcare system in America and move toward healthcare system. Medicare now works quite well for seniors. No reason why it shouldn't be expanded to every man, woman, and child in this country. And when we do that, we end the absurdity of spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other nation. You're a family of 4 today, self-employed. You're spending $28,000 a year for healthcare, and the costs are soaring. And we have every single year we're wasting many hundreds of billions of dollars on administrative costs, on billing, on excessive salaries for CEOs and so forth. So I think the American people want to see us move to a Medicare for all. We have legislation in, which I would implement as president, to cut the cost of prescription drugs in this country in half so that we are paying the same prices that people around the world are paying. So this is a big deal, Tom, and we're going to stay on it.
What are your thoughts on I've seen now a half a dozen times just in this last week, commentators and even hosts on, supposedly progressive television networks calling this proposal, Medicare for All, and many of the other proposals that Democrats are talking about, as full-blown socialism, and it's going to turn us into the Soviet Union and all this kind of stuff.
Well, look, here's what we got, and I want people to appreciate this. What our campaign is now doing is taking on, obviously, Trump and the Republican establishment. We're taking on corporate America. But in terms of health care, we are taking on a new organization which is being funded by the insurance companies and the drug companies. Now, if you were the head of United Healthcare and you made $83 million in compensation last year, you know what? You don't want a Medicare for all. You are the head of Aetna, which merged, as you know, with CVS, and you got a $500 million bonus for bringing about that merger. It's a gentleman named Mr. Bertolini, head of Aetna. You don't want a Medicare for all single-payer program, so you're going to come up with all kinds of stuff. Now, I live, and you used to live in Vermont, right? We bordered on Canada. Canada has had a single-payer system for decades now. Every other major country on earth has a variation. They're all a little bit different. Bottom line is all people get health care. Bottom line is private insurance companies do not make profits out of people's illness. Bottom line is that the cost of health care in all of those countries is significantly less. So you're going to hear all kinds of stuff, and a lot of the stuff comes from the many millions of dollars that the insurance companies and the drug companies are going to pour into this effort to defeat Medicare for all. But I got to tell you, I think we have the momentum here, and I think the healthcare industry is very, very nervous that we will end up doing what every other major country on earth does.
I think you've nailed it. I understand that you laid out a proposed change in our trade, and you and I have been talking about this for over a decade.
For a few years.
Yeah.
For a few years.
Yeah. So, share the details with us.
Well, one of the areas where Joe is a good friend of mine, and I know at the end of the day, no matter who wins the Democratic primary, we're all going to go forward together to defeat Trump. But, Joe apparently repeated yesterday that he thought his vote for NAFTA was a good vote. He voted for permanent normal trade relations with China. You add those two trade agreements together, just those two trade agreements, it's a loss of over 4 million jobs in this country, where you have often profitable corporations shutting down in America because they don't want to pay workers here $15 or $20 an hour. They prefer to go to China or Mexico and pay people $1 or $2 an hour. And I think, we have got to end that. And one of the areas, I think, where the government has a lot of leverage is to say to private corporations that if you want to shut down in America and go abroad, if you want to prevent your workers from joining a union, if you want to have salaries, CEOs making 300, 400, 500 times what your workers are making, you know what? You're not a good corporate citizen. And don't come around and ask for government contracts. So I think we have a lot of leverage on these corporations and tell them that they have got to stop their greed. I mean, what makes me sick to my stomach, and I have seen this time after time, and I think the American people are disgusted by this, is profitable corporations pay their CEOs outrageous levels of compensation. They're making all kinds of money. It's not like they're losing money. They shut down a plant, or they tell workers you got to pay more for health care. We're not going to raise your wages. I mean, corporate America has been waging a massive anti-worker effort for decades now. And it is time to use the leverage of the federal government.
Got it. We'll be right back. And let's see. Oh, it's Cory Booker. So as soon as you can get Cory Booker up, Nate, let's go with that. It's 13 minutes past the hour, and I don't know, how long is it going to take you? Oh, you got him now. Okay, here we go.
I fear that you are adding normalcy to a point where we should be sounding alarms as opposed to saying that there's nothing to see here. And so one, this 448-page report that has a deep litany of lies and deceit and misconduct of President of the United States instructing people to lie and be deceitful, evidence of people trying to cover up behavior that on its face is morally wrong, whatever the legal standard is. I found it, number one, by saying that this kind of obstructive conduct was acceptable, not only acceptable, but your sentence literally saying that the American people should be grateful for it, that is the beginning of normalization that I want to explore. But the second thing I want to explore, and we'll explore this, but I want to make my two statements at the top. One, that's problematic. And General, the second problem I have is that you seem to be excusing a campaign that literally had hundreds of contacts with a foreign adversary, that I think there's a conclusion a bipartisan conclusion, that there was a failure to even report those contacts, that we engaged in behaviors that the folks knew that were wrong, that they tried to actively hide. They seem to seek to capitalize on this foreign interference. I mean, in our country, we know it is illegal for a campaign and wrong for a campaign to share polling data with an American super PAC. But we have here documented a level of coordination with a foreign adversary sharing polling data. And we seem to be, and your conduct seems to be, trying to normalize that behavior. And that's why I think we are in such a serious moment that is eroding the cultures of this democracy and the security of this democracy. And so let's just get into some of this specifically. You said, quote, "We know that the Russian operatives who perpetrated these schemes did not have the cooperation of President Trump or the Trump campaign. That is something that all Americans can and should be grateful to have confirmed." The things I just mentioned, a willingness to meet with Russian operatives in order to capitalize on information, I don't think that's something that should be grateful. I find your choice of words alarming. I think it calls into question your objectivity when you look at the actual context of the report. And so should the American people really be grateful that a candidate for president sought to benefit from material and information that was stolen by a foreign power in an effort to influence an election?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by seek to benefit. There's no indication that they engaged in either the conspiracy to hack or that they engaged in any action with respect to the dissemination that was criminal.
Well, again, sir, you're using the word conspiracy, which is a legal term. In that press conference, you used President Trump's words, obstruction, over and over again.
Obstruction's a legal term.
Well, sir, you pulled into his words, and I'm asking you specifically. Collusion was the word I was looking for. You used the word no collusion over and over again. And you said the American people should be grateful that the president sought to benefit from material and information.
You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, you know, all you have to do is go over to ThomHartmann.com and just sign up. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's pick up Cory Booker. He is talking right now with Bill Barr.
Grateful that in the face of our attack on our democracy by a foreign adversary, that the President of the United States made several documented attempts to thwart an investigation into the links between his campaigns and Russia. You use that word grateful again, that the American people should be grateful. Is that something we should be grateful for?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Sir, I'm talking about the attempts that this president made, that Mueller pointed to at least 10 attempts to thwart an investigation into the links between his campaign and Russia. Should we be grateful for those 10 well-documented attempts by Mueller?
Are you talking about the obstruction part of the report?
I'm talking about the second volume, but let me continue. Should the American people be grateful that the Trump had more than 215 documented contacts between Russian-linked operatives and then lied about them and tried to hide them? Is that something the American people should be grateful for any president, this one or any down the road?
As I mentioned earlier, during a campaign, foreign governments make and foreign citizens frequently make a lot of attempts to contact different campaigns. If we were right now to go and look at, for example, Hillary Clinton's campaign during the same time frame, then you would see a lot of foreign governments like Chinese trying to establish.
And that's, I guess, what I'm trying to say to you, sir, is that we right now have a new normal in our country. We have a document that shows over 200 connections between a presidential campaign and a foreign adversary, sharing information that would be illegal if you did it with a super PAC. We know that. But
what information was shared?
Polling data was shared, sir. It's in the report. I can cite you the page.
With who?
And I guess my point is that your willingness to seem to brush over this and use words like the American people should be grateful. What's in this report? Nobody should be grateful. Concerted efforts for deception, for misleading, inappropriate action after inappropriate action that is clear. And then on top of that, at a time that we all recognize that we had a foreign power trying to undermine our election, you, the chief law enforcement officer, not only undermines your own credibility as an independent actor when there's ongoing investigation still, using the president's own words, having it criticized by the Mueller himself. But the challenge we now have is that we are going into an area where you seem to not even be willing to be in the least bit critical in your summarizations. I believe that calls in your credibility, and again, my time is up.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Barr, thank you for being here. In the last sentence on page 1 of your 4-page memo, it states...
Okay, so welcome back. Thom Tillis is asking questions. I don't have great hopes for that. I understand Mazie Hirono, if I have this quote accurate, and I'm not sure if it is, because I'm just kind of, it is accurate, the one that I'm kind of surfing the web here and seeing this. She said you lied, you knew you lied, and she referred to the grifter and liar who is now the president of the United States. That, God bless Mazie Hirono. We were in a break during the time that she was speaking, but I'm going to be looking for that clip, and we will share it with you tomorrow if you missed it. Janet in Concord, North Carolina. Hey, Janet, what's on your mind today? Janet, you're on the air. Janet's not listening to her phone. Lisa in Sutherland, Oregon. Hey, Lisa, you're on the air. What's up?
Oh, Tom, thank you so much. It's hard to keep up because everything changes. So, as the show progresses.
Yeah, Lisa, please get your mouth closer to the microphone of your phone.
Oh, I'm sorry, honey. I had such a bad connection, but I got in a room where I think I'm okay. I can't. So, am I all right? Can you hear me?
Yeah. What's up?
Okay. Precedent for attorney generals, John Mitchell, obstruction of justice, et cetera, and also we have all of the memos and. From Barr, the 19-page memo before he was appointed. We have all of this evidence on its face. We see obstruction right as he speaks. We see him controlling the questions, controlling the investigation as if he were the prosecutor. And we see this is not our attorney general. Please do not insult the intelligence of the American people. This man we have on his face. We see obstruction of justice, and we've seen also his history of allowing Bush one to skirt prosecution.
Yeah, to get away with crimes in both Iraq-gate, where they were selling weapons of mass destruction illegally to Iraq, to Saddam Hussein, and in the Iran-Contra hearings. I agree, Lisa. John Mitchell went to prison for 19 months for obstruction of justice and collusion with, it wasn't collusion, collusion's not a crime, and whatever it was, and conspiracy with Richard Nixon. And I personally am of the opinion that Bill Barr should be investigated with an eye to prosecution. Chris in Oakland, California. Hey, Chris, thanks for listening to AM 910. You there?
Yeah, Tom, I think we've been asking ourselves the wrong question.
as progressives. We've been asking ourselves over and over again. I've been watching it online and on call-in shows. What if Hillary had done this? What if President Obama had done this? I think a more pressing question: what if this individual sings orange sack of shame in the White House and led off on day one with this level of lawlessness and belligerence? Because this speaks to what Comey said about how you get drawn in. It's sort of the boiling the frog principle.
Right, and eventually he eats your soul.
Yeah, look where we are.
Yeah.
I mean, on day one, it was grabbing women by the genitals, and now we're talking about conspiracy and treason and things like that.
Yeah, I think that there was enough during the campaign that we should have known, and were it not for foreign interference and frankly billionaire interference in our election, there's no way that Donald Trump would be in the White House right now. Spot on, Chris. Thank you. Rick in Seattle. Hey, Rick, what's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. Thanks. First-time caller. A little nervous. So I just maybe someone's called in before and shared, but we were hacked at our home Wi-Fi a couple years ago, and I knew something was up before that. So I had made an outreach call to the FBI and whatnot, and the piece, it turns out, it was a Russian, and they caught him. So I'm a little bit of that.
How did they hack your Wi-Fi, and how did you find out about it?
Well, the thing is, I work out of my car on an iPhone, and I had started an iPad that my wife suggested that I buy. And when I started it up, that's when the hack came, because I hadn't downloaded the most up-to-date software for the iPad.
So you had a system vulnerability. I get it. So where are you going with this, Rick?
Well, you're the first public entity that I'm calling, and it's taking me a little courage to do this. So the piece is that it's pretty much resolved. We're secure at home, but it changed, the world outlook for me in terms of.
Sure, I get it. But what's your point?
It was a relative. So the last piece was it was a relative involved in this whole process, an American citizen.
Oh no.
So that's what I'm sharing. Maybe you haven't heard about this. So they're on the ground. The troops are on the ground, is how I say it or think about it, and they're on the other side. I'm a progressive, and they're, the other side. I don't want to get too nasty. It was a cousin. She was out to try and get me as a progressive.
I thought it was a Russian hack.
It was. She was connected. Sorry, I got to close my windows. I'm in a car.
Yeah.
So that's my point. And I don't know what the status of it now is, but the Russians so all your stuff that you're hearing with the Fed makes sense to me, because however they reached out, and I think it was several years ago.
Yeah.
Partly, and this is an allegation from me.
Yeah.
Partly,
I get it, Rick. Rick, thanks a lot for the call, and the somewhat confusing story. Anyhow, it's 27 minutes past the hour. Kamala Harris is going to be interviewing Mr. Barr next. Stick around. We'll catch as much of this as we can on the other side of the break. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour on the Thom Hartmann Program.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back. We'll be right back. It's 28 minutes past the hour. Coming up on.
Okay.
This
in your March 24th summary, you wrote that, quote, after reviewing the special counsel's final report.
But I will say that no one.
Sir, I'm asking a question. In your March 24th summary, you wrote that, quote, after reviewing the special counsel's final report, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein and I have concluded that the evidence is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. Now, the special counsel's investigation produced a great deal of evidence. I'm led to believe it included witnesses' notes and emails, witnesses' congressional testimony, witnesses' interviews, which were summarized in the FBI 302 forms, former FBI Director Comey's memos, and the president's public statements. My question is, in reaching your conclusion, did you personally review all of the underlying evidence?
No, we took and accepted. We accepted
Mr.
the
Rosenstein?
No, we accepted the statements in the report as the factual record. We did not go underneath it to see whether or not they were accurate. We accepted it as accurate and made our.
So you accepted the report as the evidence?
Yes.
You did not question or look at the underlying evidence that supports the conclusions in the report?
No.
Did Mr. Rosenstein review the evidence that underlines and supports the conclusions in the report, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge. We accepted the statements in the report
Did
and
anyone
the
in your-
characterization of the evidence is true.
Did anyone in your executive office review the evidence supporting the report?
No.
No. Yet you represented to the American public that the evidence was not, quote, sufficient to support an obstruction of justice offense.
The evidence presented in the report. This is not mysterious process. In the Department of Justice, we have pros memos and declination memos every day coming up, and we don't go and look at the underlying evidence.
Sir, would you support
we take the characterization of the evidence as true?
As the Attorney General of the United States, you run the United States Department of Justice. If in any U.S. attorney's office around the country, the head of that office, when being asked to make a critical decision about, in this case, the person who holds the highest office in the land, and whether or not that person committed a crime, would you accept them recommending a charging decision to you if they had not reviewed the evidence?
Well, that's a question for Bob Mueller. He's the U.S. attorney. He's the one who presents the report.
But it was you who made the charging decision, sir. You made the decision not to charge the president.
No, in a pros memo and in a declination memo.
You said it was your baby. What did you mean by that?
It was my baby to decide whether or not to disclose it to the public.
And whose decision was it? Who had the power to make the decision about whether or not the evidence was sufficient to make a determination of whether there had been an obstruction of justice?
Prosecution memos go up to the supervisor. In this case, it was the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General who decide on the final decision. And that is based on the memo as presented by the U.S. Attorney's Office.
I think you've made it clear that you've not looked at the evidence. We can move on. I think you've made it clear, sir, that you've not looked at the evidence, and we can move on. Will you agree to consult career DOJ ethics officials about whether your recusal from the 14 investigations that have been discussed by my colleagues is necessary?
I don't see any basis for it. I already consulted with them, and
you have consulted with them about the 14 other investigations?
About the Mueller case.
Have you consulted with the career DOJ ethics officials about the appropriateness of you being involved or recusing yourself from the 14 other investigations that have been referred out?
On what basis?
Conflict of interest, clear conflict of interest.
What's my conflict of interest?
I think the American public has seen quite well that you are biased in this situation and you've not been objective, and that would arguably be the conflict of interest.
I haven't been the only decision maker here. Now, let's take the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who was approved by this Senate 94-6 with specific discussion on the floor that he would be responsible for supervising the Russian investigation.
I'm glad you brought up that.
Okay?
That's a great topic.
He has 30 years experience, and we had a number of senior prosecutors in the department involved in this process, both career and non-career.
Yes, I've read the process, sir. I have another question. And I'm glad you brought that subject up because I have a question about that. Earlier today, in response to Senator Graham, you said, quote, that you consulted with Rosenstein constantly, unquote, with respect to the special counsel's investigation and report. But Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein is also a key witness in the firing of FBI Director Comey. Did you consult I'm not finished.
Yeah.
Did you consult with DOJ ethics officials before you enlisted Rod Rosenstein to participate in a charging decision for an investigation, the subject of which he is also a witness?
My understanding was that he had been cleared already to participate in it by the.
So you had consulted with them and they cleared it?
No, I think they cleared it when he took over the investigation.
Did you
That's
consult?
my understanding.
You don't know whether he's been cleared? of a conflict of interest?
He would be participating if there was a conflict of interest.
So you're saying that it did not need to be reviewed by the career ethics officials in your office?
I believe
to determine
it
if
was
appropriate?
Well, I believe it was reviewed, and I
And what
would
was the
also point
finding?
out this seems to be a bit of a flip-flop because when
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And I think, Sean, you've got that clip of Mazie Hirono. It's just an extraordinary moment here. Listen to this.
Mr. Barr, now the American people know that you are no different from Rudy Giuliani or Kellyanne Conway or any of the other people who sacrificed their once decent reputation for the grifter and liar who sits in the Oval Office. You once turned down a job offer from Donald Trump to represent him as his private attorney. At your confirmation hearing, you told Senator Feinstein that, quote, the job of Attorney General is not the same as representing, end quote, the president. So you know the difference, but you've chosen to be the president's lawyer and side with him over the interests of the American people. To start with, you should never have been involved.
It goes on from there. That's remarkable. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is. I think she just wrapped up.
I have nothing else. My time is right out.
Yeah. Okay. That's Kamala Harris. She got in a few good ones too. There. There was some just great questioning, and anyhow, Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. I think I probably ask you this question once a year, and your response is always okay. It's what we're going to do about these big insurance companies once we phase in, universal coverage. And your response is usually let them wither on the vine. But it's trillions of dollars.
What did we do? What did we do with the big buggy whip companies and the cart manufacturers and the horse harness companies? You know, when cars came out, they went out of business and then they got replaced by something else.
Well, I agree, and I wish that could happen. But what worries me is this is trillions of dollars, and we have
it's not trillions of dollars, Bill. Trillions of dollars are flowing through. That may be the cash flow.
Right.
But the amount of money that's actually that is actually animating the insurance companies, the amount of money that the insurance companies are using to pay for their executives, to pay for their advertising, to pay for their staff who vet your claims and all that kind of stuff, that is mere billions.
Right. Well, my proposal was to let them beat their swords into plowshares and be given incentives of whatever it is to use their money to build teaching hospitals, which is what we're going to need, and to fund research in medical science so they can actually be part of the medical industry.
Yeah,
and lower
I respectfully disagree.
Money.
I think these insurance companies just need to go away. And again, we're talking, I mean, Apple just showed a profit for a quarter, for a 3-month profit of, as I recall, in the neighborhood of somewhere between $20 and $30 billion. That's probably more money than what the insurance companies are spending on their staff, on their employees. And it's a relatively meaningless drop in the bucket. Bill, thanks for the call. John in Oak Park, Illinois. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, hey, thanks for taking my call. I just want to comment to the Barr audition memo, the 17-page thing he did a year ago.
Right.
As I understand it, the premise that Barr had posed in that is that a president cannot have criminal intent. He can only have presidential intent.
Correct.
Which right there means that he can't be indicted for shooting someone on Fifth Avenue.
Right.
He can only.
And Nixon never, and by Barr's logic, Nixon never would have been impeached.
But that whole thing is like nuts.
I agree. I agree. And so do most legal scholars. I mean, you got all these constitutional lawyers and whatnot going, huh? And now, Barr is trotting this stuff out, and he's just being made an absolute fool of by these senators. John, spot on. Thank you. Tim in Naples, Maine. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Hi.
Hey.
Hello. Oh, hey. I just jumped in the shower. Now I'm jumping out of the shower.
Good idea. You're on the air. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to get it together here, Tim, before I cut you off.
Okay. Here's what happens. Why are they not interviewing this guy along with Mueller and Rosenstein at the same time? They need to be together.
Because Mueller and Rosenstein both work for Bill Barr, and Bill Barr has told them they may not testify. And Mueller has apparently told some people that he's actually quitting his job in the next week. And I'm wondering if that's so that he'll be able to testify, because right now Bill Barr can prevent him from testifying. And Barr has already said that, you know, there are other people, for example, Don McGahn, who he's going to actively work to prevent from testifying. This is full out cover-up mode. This is fully why back in the day, back in the 90s, 91 and 92, you had William Safire, whose on-language column was just an absolute gem in the New York Times and a staple. I used to read it all the time. And he called Bill Barr Cover-Up General Barr because, he covered up the Iran-Contra deal. He covered up the Iraq-Gate deal. So, that's what's going on. Bruce in Thornhill, Tennessee. Hey, Bruce, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, thanks for all the good work you do.
Thank you.
I'm a retired journalist and lifelong registered Republican. And the party of Trump, the Republican Party of Trump, has mastered the art of sophistry. And I think there's enough of us that see through it. I'll never vote for these Republicans again. And I think there's a lot of other people like me, because I'm in the middle of Trump country here.
Yeah.
And it's just ridiculous. But I mean, the morals and ethics are out the window.
Yeah, I'm with you, Bruce. My dad was a lifelong Republican. He died a Republican, and I don't think that he would have tolerated this.
Yeah.
I mean, George W. Bush was pushing the boundaries for
Talking
him.
to people at the grocery store locally, other people feel the same way I do, and this is the heart of Trump country here.
Yeah.
And they're just wasting our country away, letting these huge corporations take over everything, and individuals have less and less rights and less money.
Yep.
And it's just a shame what's happening.
No, it's been a 40-year assault on American democracy by the Republican Party, and now they're teaming up with oligarchs and autocrats all over the world to do it. Bruce, thank you for your call, and thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. We'll be back. It's 41 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're picking up the Mueller hearings, or the Barr hearings, actually, when Democrats are questioning. Right now, a Republican is. And picking up your calls when the Republicans are. And welcome back. Carl in Concord, North Carolina. Hey, Carl, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Glad to talk to you. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to talk to you just because I'm an employee at UNC Charlotte, where we had the shooting last night.
Oh, my.
And I don't have anything new to add to the shooting. I was actually on campus in lockdown for a few hours. We couldn't leave. But I just thought this was something you may want to stick around in the back of your mind next time you're talking about our problems with guns on campus, well, across the country. Our chancellor, Phil Dubois, was the president of the University of Wyoming back in 1998, back when Alan Shepard was a student there, the young gay student who got beaten and tortured and left to die. And Phil Dubois had to take care of all of the trauma on campus then. And now he's our chancellor at UNC Charlotte. We're at the point now where this happens so frequently. We're having university administrators who are having to deal with this multiple times in the course of their careers.
Yeah, this is the fourth This is the fourth mass shooting this week.
Yeah. Yeah, it's our first one. Thank goodness we were prepared for it. They had great warning systems there. We knew what to do, how to minimize it. I mean, you can't prevent this stuff. The best you can do is try to mitigate it as best you can by preparing people. But I just wanted to point out that this has become so common now. We're having actual experienced leaders now going through this sort of thing multiple times, and that's got to take its toll on the system eventually. So just wanted to get that out there. So thank you for taking my call.
Oh, Carl, I think it's absolutely bizarre that we live in a country, literally the only developed country in the world, where mass shootings are happening on a regular basis. and consider the damage. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on what kind of damage this is doing to the students. I mean, when I was a kid going to elementary school in the 1950s, we had duck and cover, you know, and the bell would go off, and it was not the time for recess, so we'd all jump under the desk and you know, cover our eyes and ears with our thumbs and fingers, and you know, and kind of giggle, you know. I mean, it was a game for us. In fact, there was this little turtle, duck and cover, you know, this cartoon, And you know, we didn't really take it seriously. I mean, some people got kind of freaked out. You know, we're all going to die in a nuclear attack or whatever. But you know, not in school. I mean, during the drills, that's when people, you know, nobody was freaked out. But I understand that some schools actually bring people in who are like pretending to be shooters in ways that are causing, you know, 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds to just fall apart in tears and freaking out and having nightmares. I mean, we're inflicting post-traumatic stress disorder on an entire generation of children.
We definitely are. I mean, I know some of the kids who've been through some of this stuff, and when you're told at the age of 6, 7, 8 that adults may come in who want to kill you, and what you need to do is run around in your classroom and throw papers so that the targets are harder to hit. Yeah, maybe you're sacrificing yourself to save the kid in the next desk over. Yeah, we're doing... I really wonder if these drills aren't causing more problems and more trauma for some of the children than if we just didn't train them in the first place.
Oh, you wonder how many of these kids are just going to shut down psychologically at some point, and they're going to end up being the next generation of shooters, or the next generation of just, you know, kind of zombies in our society or something. You know, what kind of damage is this doing? It's amazing. Carl, thank you for the call. We'll be back with more of the hearings. Oh, geez, Ted Cruz is asking questions right now. I'm not sure I want to go there. We'll be back with more of your calls. Stick around. You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, you know, all you have to do is go over to ThomHartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Mark in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I was just wondering what you thought about, I haven't heard the whole hearings today. I've been off and on, but has any of the Democratic senators asked Barr why he's not going to allow certain people to testify under him?
Yes, one of them, and forgive me for not remembering which one, but one of them got into a lengthy colloquy with him about it, or kind of debate with him, actually, back about an hour and a half ago.
How did he defend that? I mean, that he wouldn't let someone else testify.
It was about Don McGahn specifically, and he said he didn't think that, and they, whoever the senator was, pointed out Don McGahn is now a private citizen, and he was like, well, still, you know, this is you know, privileged information. He's asserting executive privilege. He's saying that if you served the president, if you served Trump in that, you know, in any capacity, then your conversations with Trump are absolutely privileged. And there is this thing called, you know, executive privilege. And or presidential privilege, or whatever you want to call it, and it's real. But whether it can extend, in particular, to crimes, this is the thing. If there was an impeachment hearing going on, they could get around executive privilege. I'm pretty sure you can't assert executive privilege during an impeachment hearing. But you know,
but he already waived that too. I mean, by meeting with Mueller.
Well, yeah, and in fact, that was another point that one of the senators made, was that Don McGahn has already waived executive privilege by meeting with Mueller, so he can't assert it now. And Barr was like, no, I think I can assert it, so I'm going to go with it. So, you know.
Do you think someone will subpoena Trump to testify? Would Schiff or someone like that subpoena Trump? And if so, would that be obstruction if he doesn't show up?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure that if Congress were to subpoena the president, I don't think they can do that. I mean, they're co-equal branches of government. I don't think that they can subpoena the president any more than the president can demand that members of Congress, you know, come and answer to him.
Wasn't Bill Clinton subpoenaed during the 90s for, you know, before Congress?
That was by Ken Starr, and that was in this the civil investigation of it started out with the Paula Jones lawsuit. And, you know,
the president was subpoenaed, an active president was subpoenaed before Congress.
Right, but he was subpoenaed by the Justice Department indirectly through Ken Starr, I believe, not by Congress.
Oh.
So, you know, it's a different thing. I mean, you know, Ken Starr he was actually an independent counsel. That was when the independent counsel law was still around. So, again, it wasn't Congress. It was a separate body that had the ability. In fact, the independent counsel laws were put together specifically so that somebody other than Congress could interrogate the president. So, you know, there's a lot to sort through here, Mark, and it's getting really, really interesting. Mark, thanks a lot for the call. Chris in Baldwin, New York. Hey, Chris, what's up?
Hey, Tom, what's happening? It's always great to hear your voice and learn a lot listening to you.
Thank you.
Maybe I'm not looking at this the right way, but to what extent are people not focusing or asking enough? Why was the Trump campaign not obliged, responsible to at least report this contact from the Russians made to them to tamper in the election? You know, the conspiracy thing, you know, I definitely think they were guilty, but that's a different point. But even if they were found not to have conspired, what about the fact that they never reported it? I don't hear anybody pressing any of his talking heads or any of the pundits or even asking Barr. What was the president's responsibility to report this?
Well, one of the Democrats earlier did ask Barr that, and Barr kind of punted on the question. And the point is that this was actually a crime. I mean, you know, the Mueller report concluded that you know, I believe the Internet Research Agency, that this Russian agency, had actually committed crimes under the U.S. law and indicted a number of Russians for it. And so, you know, to have knowledge of a crime and not report it is a crime in and of itself. So I think that Donald Trump Jr. in particular has a lot to answer for here. And I'm with you on this, Chris. You know, the first call, just like when, I mean, you know, this wasn't even the Russians, but when Al Gore was offered George W. Bush's private briefing papers for his debates, and when Jimmy Carter was offered the private briefing, you know, was offered, who was he running against? Reagan, wasn't it? 1980, yeah. When he was offered Reagan's private briefing notes, in both cases, they turned it down and they called the FBI. In both cases. And then you get, you know, Donald Trump Jr. being offered, you know, help from the Russians, and he's like, oh, I love it. I mean, that's the verbatim quote. So, yeah, I think that there is an actionable thing here. The question is, you know, who's going to take that action? Right now it's up to Congress. But, you know, we'll see. Oh, Patrick Leahy is back up. Chris, I got to run. Pat Leahy is up again. Let's go back to the hearings.
Had the requisite intent to commit obstruction of justice. Well, there are numerous reasons why somebody might interfere with investigations. Most critically, an interference may prevent the discovery of an underlying crime. So interfering, you might not know if there's a crime. But the special counsel did uncover evidence of underlying crimes here, including one that directly implicated the president. And then we learned, due to the special counsel's investigation, that Donald Trump is known as Individual One in the Southern District of New York, directing hush payments as part of a criminal scheme to violate campaign finance laws. That matter was discovered by the special counsel, referred to the Southern District of New York. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And we have, the Mueller report references a dozen ongoing investigations stemming from the special counsel's investigation. Will you commit that you will not interfere with those investigations?
Can you say?
Do you commit that you will not interfere with the dozen ongoing investigations?
I will supervise those investigations as Attorney General.
We let them reach natural conclusions without interference from the White House. Let me put it that way, then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you, yeah, as I said when I was up for confirmation, part of my responsibility is to make sure there is no political interference in cases.
Well, and you testified a number of things, and that's why I'm double checking. You, in the Appropriations Committee, I asked you whether Mr. Mueller expressed any expectation or interest in leaving the obstruction decision to Congress, and you testified he didn't say that to you. Actually, as you said, he didn't say that to me.
Right.
But then he has numerous references in his report to Congress playing a role in deciding whether the president committed obstruction of justice. So I know you testified many times, but that testimony was not correct.
That's not correct. I think it is correct. I mean, he has not said that he conducted the investigation in order to turn it over to Congress. That would be very inappropriate. That's not what the Justice Department does.
He included numerous references, report to Congress playing a role in it. Volume 2, page 8, conclusion that Congress may apply the obstruction laws to the president's corrupt exercise of the powers of office in accordance with our constitutional system of justice.
Yeah, I don't think Bob Mueller was suggesting that the next step here was for him to turn this stuff over to Congress to act upon. That's not why we conduct grand jury investigations.
And President Trump, I am correct in my earlier statement, never allowed anybody to interview him directly under oath. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
Even though he said he was ready to testify. Thank you.
Well, could I?
Sure.
A point you raised about the absence of a underlying crime. One point I was trying to make earlier is the absence of an underlying crime doesn't necessarily mean that there would be other motives for obstruction, although it gets a little bit harder to prove and more speculative as to what those motives might be. But the point I was trying to make earlier is that in the situation of the president, who has constitutional authority to supervise proceedings, if in fact a proceeding was not well-founded, if it was a groundless proceeding, if it was based on false allegations, the president does not have to sit there constitutionally and allow it to run its course. The president could terminate that proceeding, and it would not be a corrupt intent because he was being falsely accused, and he would be worried about the impact on his administration. That's important because most of the obstruction claims that are being made here, or episodes, do involve the exercise of the president's constitutional authority, and we now know that he was being falsely accused.
Amazing. Bill Barr spinning and lying and committing obstruction of justice right in front of our eyes under oath before the United States Senate. This guy really deserves the John Mitchell treatment. John Mitchell, by the way, got 19 months in prison for obstructing justice when he was Richard Nixon's Attorney General, if you're not familiar with the name. Anyhow, thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, and we'll see if Bill Barr is going to testify before the House or not. I have a feeling after the shellacking he got today in the Senate, he won't. Don't forget, democracy's not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.